Is this for your parents living up there?
Yeah. In Stamford, New York, which is
I
it's
got a
not.
question. What's the warranty on the refrigerator?
Oh, you'd have to ask my brother. I have no idea.
Well,
Probably,
do you think it's going to
10 years
last
or
this?
whatever it is.
Who's
Yeah.
going to last? Who's going to die out first? The fridge or the parents?
Well, my dad's still around, so
Oh, he's pretty old now, right?
I mean, yeah, though we had probably the old refrigerator we had there was maybe 20 years before it like eventually conked out.
He's got another 20 years to go, huh? That's good.
We'll see.
We'll see.
How long do you got, Ken? you know, are you
no,
gonna
I'm,
outlast your refrigerator a year?
no. I got a target. I'm going to go another 15 years. That's it. See, and that's so when they tell me, oh, this has got a 20-year warranty, I say, who cares?
Yeah, but it was
You don't
nice to be up there for because again, this was like last week when it was like in the 90s here, so it was 20 well 15 20 degrees cooler over there. So
Oh yeah, you guys went through a heat wave.
yeah, but well, you guys are used to that in LA, right?
Got pretty hot here too. I think it was almost hit 80.
Right. Well, I mean, you guys have
So
you guys you
do
guys you
what,
guys are probably going to be more. I mean, you're not in a very unnatural place in Los Angeles. Like, if they didn't have the aqueducts, you wouldn't, you wouldn't have water essentially. So once climate change really hits, they're going to have to pack up and move somewhere else eventually. And these guys. Oh, I should send you this. Yeah, being discussed. Yeah, these guys. I guess it was Financial Times. They put out an article talking about how climate change is going to eventually, like, you're not going to be able to get insurance in California, or fire insurance, or flood insurance in Florida, or California. So they're predicting that basically that's going to crash the whole economy, because you won't be able to you won't, without insurance you can't get a mortgage. So, and that's going to basically unravel the whole banking system, because again, mortgages are a huge, that's how banks make
I have a
money.
question. The people who have these fantastic predictions, did they graduate high school yet?
Oh no, these are PhD economists, Ken.
Oh,
It's the
now I.
Financial Times.
The world is
They're
coming to
very,
the end. The world will end in another hour and a half.
no, this is entirely no. I mean, it makes sense too, because again, if you can't, who's gonna, if what happened, was it just a few months ago in LA? If that keeps happening, who's gonna who's gonna want to insure houses in LA if the city keeps burning to the ground, or you keep getting fires all the time?
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Yeah,
Nobody
that's
there.
what do you think happens?
With what?
Nobody is gonna insure somebody if they're gonna pay out all the time. The point of insurance, well, from the insurer's point of view, is to take your money and not pay it out to you.
Well, I think we survived what's the guy's name from Mexico?
Pancho Villa.
Pancho Villa and World War II and the plague and the pandemic and the governor oh shit, geez, the names are going. The Terminator was governor.
Right. Well,
We had Ronald Reagan. We survived him and Pat Brown.
I
And
think
we had a black president, Obama. So,
oh,
anything can
yeah, I
happen
think
and
your
we'll get
Governor
through it.
Newsom
We'll get through it.
wants to
Things
run it
change.
for 2028.
I don't know. Oh, that's another thing. Gay marriage. We never had that. That's brand new. And the what do you call that? The birth rate, the fertility rate amongst wealthy white Americans is down below like 1.4. Amongst blacks and Latinos, it's still like 2.3. But amongst whites and Gen X's, it's down to almost zero. So, maybe we won't survive
Yeah,
that. If there's nobody around, nobody's getting born.
sure.
I have to open up the gates and have people coming in from all over. You know.
Well, yeah, that's what immigration is.
Oh, that I was going to look something up. I haven't had a chance because I keep hearing in the news. There's did you ever watch Amy Goodman? You watch Amy Goodman?
I watch clips of hers. I don't regularly.
Everyone, whatever she has a number, she says, and 5 billion, 5,000. It doesn't matter what the quantity is. She always hits it heavy on
Well,
the categorize. And 5 billion people didn't have handkerchiefs.
yeah, she did a good piece on Bill Moyers.
Oh, Bill Moyers, yeah, touchy,
Him
touchy,
passing.
touchy.
Yeah, she obviously, they pulled out a clip of where he had been interviewed.
Yeah, but he's been
Him, her, and
been out of the
Juan.
scene for like 30 years.
Yeah. Well, no. Again, the thing is, he actually did before. Again, he's 91, but he actually did a last documentary, which actually I saw though. That's pretty good. It's was on Frontline. I mean, again, back in the 90s, he had like done this thing where he followed these. He and I guess his team, they followed three families, like through the economy, like over, again, now it's I think like 3 or 4 decades. So again, they did like a thing back in like the 2000s about them, and so they basically followed up with them and were seeing like where are they now kind of thing. But again, it was
making news.
It was really well done again about how the economy's changed, how
You're not talking about the Loud family, right?
I forget what they were. There were.
Remember the Loud family? It was the first time they had like real TV cameras.
It was like what one was white, one was African American. I think one was Hispanic.
Oh, I don't know.
So they were being demographically broad. No,
well,
but again, they were and they were pretty typical again.
But Bill Moyers,
they were all a lot of them were former like blue collar workers, and like again starting in like the early 90s, and like so you followed them as they kind of.
Oh, wait. So this is a question maybe you guys can answer. I have a question. But so what I was saying is I'm hearing one announcer after the other saying the largest drop in Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, the largest drop, the biggest withholding of money.
I think.
The cut. The largest drop has ever in Medicaid, at least it said in modern history. And my question was, what were the major increases in Medicaid? What did they say? The largest increase in Medicaid in history.
Obamacare expanded and put a decent amount of more money in it. So yeah.
So Obamacare increased,
and I think before that basically was again there was cost of living.
I don't think
it changed too much. And Clinton had made cuts, as part of his welfare reform.
But the biggest boom in Medicaid was under
the biggest boom was its creation by LBJ, basically.
By who?
LBJ.
Oh.
And again, that's why of course, again, I think they had some. Obviously, Moyers actually I think was involved with that. Because remember, he was LBJ's press secretary and his assistant, so I think he worked on Medicare and Medicaid. Passing the law, but also, writing it. As you made the point again, and actually in the clip Amy had that, people forget, where LBJ, he started off as a teacher in, I think it's Southwest Texas, in this very poor part of the state, which was a lot of Hispanic Americans. And, one of the reasons, and Moyer said again, one of the reasons he wanted to do Medicare and Medicaid is, again, he saw, again, how these poor people were affected by not having care. Yeah.
His father was a laborer.
Yeah.
And let me just get straight to the chase. Moyers actually said once, when Democracy Now! Was evolving, that it should be on public television. Now, and that, of course, I'm sure Amy doesn't forget. Now, Moyers, of course, he went through a lot of transformations. Marshall, Texas is where he was from. He made a big deal about that. He actually would go back to Marshall, Texas, and do local kind of shows about that. And, someone like Johnson, I mean, Johnson, um, whatever anyone think about LBJ, he was sort of somebody who, grew up in an area where Mexican Americans were. So did anyone who grew up in Texas, that, you're going to be around Mexican Americans. And so Moyers was somebody who, had those kind of experiences. Now, of course, what really was important with him, he went to UT, he, eventually got a doctorate, I believe. But I think he got siphoned off to work for Kennedy during the campaign. So he actually worked for Sergeant Shriver in the Peace Corps. And then he, worked for the Peace Corps, and then he became the assistant, the press secretary to LBJ. And he also helped create public broadcasting. So he was very important in all that. He was actually on the committee when, I don't know, you guys, well, Newton Minow was the FCC chair in 1961. And he basically made this famous speech about the vast wasteland of American broadcasting. And that created a commission by the Carnegie Corporation. And Moyers was on that commission. It led to the creation of public television, or sort of reinforced what was going on. So he was very important in the CPB being created, NPR being created. And he was with it from the start. So, and so the Johnson administration really was a very important part of his development. He was supposedly responsible for the famous, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 atomic bomb advertisement during the Fort Goldwater campaign. And then the war in Vietnam is what really did it to him. That I think is what really, the civil rights movement, the war in Vietnam, he basically saw that the legacy of the Great Society, he loved Lyndon Johnson. He was one of these people who appreciated Lyndon Johnson's desire to finish the New Deal for everybody. And then, of course, that got bollocksed up by the war in Vietnam and then the reaction to it and Nixon getting elected. So that was something that always influenced him forever. And then when he worked at CBS, he worked at NBC, and then he shifted to PBS. That to me was, the Bill Moyers Journal. I met once the head of his production, who was a very nice woman. She was a very important and powerful individual in public broadcasting. A really nice woman, a real nice individual. I forget her name. And so he really had an influence on a lot of people. He was very good to watch as an interviewer. I learned a lot. I used to learn a lot from him, watching him. Sort of also, looking here in New York, another great interviewer, Lenny Lopate, unfortunately has been diagnosed with a really debilitating disease. But there's been great interviewers on. The one thing he did, which I found really cool, was he was involved in this series. I think he did it with Walter Cronkite, and they were taking the great literary works of American history and doing really sophisticated documentaries. I mean, really sophisticated documentaries. And some of those people, I should add, came from Pacifica. The guys who were in that production teams were people who were old school Pacifica people from the 60s. And Moyers was really a gentleman. He was thoughtful. So it's a real loss to broadcasting when he began to.
Of course, everybody remembers the series he did with Joseph Campbell that really popularized all that.
Well, right. Campbell. Campbell.
And that's,
Yeah. My mother, look, I knew Campbell.
I didn't see it for a while, but again, they would, whenever they would have, the fundraising, of course, they would always rerun it,
Right. Well, Campbell, my mother had him as a professor at Sarah Lawrence. And so Campbell was always a very interesting character. But, but he was just a person who had, a really interesting impact on broadcasting. And it's really
I just read this book about, talking about American culture in the 90s. And this guy was, he was arguing that Campbell was kind of, if you look carefully, Campbell was kind of a reactionary in some of his ideas.
Campbell basically, as I understand it, Campbell was having a great time sleeping with all those pretty rich girls at Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, really?
But in any event, he was very involved with the whole question of he had big battles with CPB. I mean, he was a very important person on in broadcasting, and he also countered and argued about the whole question of liberal bias. He was always a target for the right wing during the 80s when he was doing his documentary work. So, anyway, he's a very
and
important
the last,
person.
I think of his last show was, I think, and on PBS was, again, like that Moyers and Company that he did for a few years.
Right.
But I think eventually he got, they pulled the plug on him because he was having some he was having, some real radicals on it, Marxist economist and of course Chris Hedges. But you could see what's coming because again, it was like, oh
Yeah, but he, I don't agree. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think what happened was, he did get into this big fight where there was a big, he got into a big fight in 2003 with the then chair of the CPB, who felt that he didn't have any balance. That's where your argument is partly right, but this kind of battles have been going on forever in the media. We certainly see it right now in a different way with this settlement with CBS with Paramount. So it's a very but Moyers had a great impact on as did Buckley, by the way. I mean, I would actually say that to William F. Buckley, as much as I disagree with him and everything politically, he also had an impact on broadcasting. And he was actually somebody who brought on dissonant ideas, even though sometimes, the one thing, of course, is with having Gore Vidal come on. That was always hilarious with him and Buckley. But, but again, Moyers was...
Chomsky on.
Although Buckley, of course, he is, when he does that book, God, and what is it, God?
God and Man at Yale.
Yeah, God and Man at Yale. I mean, that was sort of like the big Bible for conservatives in the early 50s and mid 50s. But Moyers, again, is someone who really had an impact. And again, I learned a lot from watching Moyers. I did indeed. I always learn from watching Moyers.
Yeah.
Okay. Not bad. So what caused his decease? Just old age or cancer?
He died of prostate.
Prostate cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was 91, so he didn't live a long life.
Which may eventually get me too, but what the hell? You got to go,
Yeah.
Yeah, they need help on the other side.
Yeah, right. Or else they'll be in limbo, right?
And Jim, I think he was always a Baptist, Moyers, right?
I don't know. He, I really don't know his personal religion. He was, again, I only had the pleasure. The funny thing about Moyers, he was actually the director of the Council on Foreign Relations up to 1974. Yeah, from 67 to 1974, he was the director of the Council on Foreign Relations, which shows how he changed.
Yeah,
he really changed, and he, of course, that would give him, the Council on Foreign Relations is sort of a thoughtful club of the ruling class. So he was actually in the midst of all that, and sort of a centrist approach. But Moyers indeed was somebody I felt, and yes, he did. He moved into a left liberal stance as he got older, but I think it also was due to his concern and proper concern over class divisions and inequality in America, which always motivated his work. And so anyway, he's an unusual guy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Hey, this is kind of like harmonic to that. I put it in the invite. Who do you think is going to be the most likely head of the Democratic Party or becoming a candidate for the presidency in 2028? And
who do you think, Kenny?
I think your governor wants to be anyway.
Well, yeah, he's so gross. I mean, he's so transparent. Well, I want to debate this guy. This guy's got a lot of cameras. I want to debate this.
All right.
it can't be Zoran because he's well, he can't run for president anyway because he wasn't born here.
No, he's not. Well,
He's not going to debate Zoran.
Even if he wanted to again, I think he's born.
Zoran cannot be president because he was not born in the United States, but
Yeah.
AOC could. So obviously,
She probably wants to run against Schumer.
She could. Yeah, that's right. She'd be a very interesting race if she ran against Schumer. But right now, of course, the Zoran. Zoran. I mean, I sit there and have a lot of fun trolling the Fox News feed, and it's really amazing to read that because as much as I will argue with Kenny, Kenny's like mild compared to some of these guys. I mean, they just come out with the most outrageous bullshit. It's just amazing. But it's good. It's useful to read it because you're sort of like, like they're all like happy about the ICE raids. They're getting off on it. They feel like Mayor Bass should be deported. And then this whole thing about Zoran being deported. I mean, I take that seriously that these guys could actually come up with something like that. And Trump, of course, has threatened to arrest him. But again, what is amazing to me is, okay, so why did he win? He won because he ran a better campaign. That's first of all. He was out there relentlessly. Cuomo had the problem of the sex scandals, but also that whole nursing home fiasco where all those people died. That was something that people didn't really love him too much for. And then on a personal level, everybody I've known who've worked with him politically, they've always said he acts like a complete asshole. So they always had a problem with him. Now, on the other hand, you've got someone like Adams. Now, Adams, always was sort of a complete control freak. You talk to Jordan. Jordan was working in the borough president's office for a couple of years, and he was there when he left before Adams became borough president. But then when Adams became borough president, it was a whole different demeanor over there because Adams is a big control freak. But when Adams came in, he already had bribery problems with some of his supporters. And I always felt that, like, okay, we're probably going to see a situation where this guy's going to get hammered over issues of corruption, which is what exactly happened. So he's sort of discredited in that sense. Although you never know what will happen if he gets a lot of money. But I don't think that's going to work. The thing they'll have to do is split the black vote. The black vote, Zoran, I'm sure, is aware of the fact that he cannot get elected completely in the city of New York, just simply having working class immigrants and progressive lefties as his base. Then you have, so Adams, I think, is an interesting character. Then you have the other problem of, what's his name, Sliwa. Now, Curtis, I've always respected the Guardian Angels, but he's like a big loudmouth New Yorker. He's got his tongue up the right wing's ass. He's got Giuliani. He's like, if I was sitting there, like, got the jerk off Giuliani that he also supports. And, so I think what they were talking about is running Richie Torres, congressman from the Bronx. What's his name? Bill Ackman, the guy, the big billionaire. He wants to back. So right now they're trying to figure out how to bankroll him while at the same time, Trump's calling him a communist lunatic. They're actually talking about deporting him. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that. But the message to the American public is that here's this guy in favor of low rent, free buses, which actually they're doing in other parts of the United States. The question of, I think the one weakness is putting in these low-cost stores in each borough, because I don't know if they have the scale of a food chain to be able to offer cheaper prices. But the idea is not a bad idea, because we all know how, where you go shop. If you're in California, I guess you go shop at Costco. I don't know where you go shop in California, Kenny, but in New York.
No. It's a lot of advances that happen in LA wind up in New York.
Correct.
And that was like the first one it hit was Whole Foods, and then Trader Joe's. And the shocking thing is, in Trader Joe's, a New Yorker would go up to a guy who works there and says, "Where's the bread?" And he says, "Oh, I'll show you. Come with me." And the New Yorker goes, "What?" Because you're supposed to say, "What am
Well,
I?"
Well, no, the Trader Joe people,
Can't
the
figure
Trader
that
Joe,
out yourself,
no, the Trader Joe staff is always very nice to deal with. They're always
They're
very nice to
totally
deal with.
cordial,
Yeah,
and
they are. They
also
are.
they rotate.
Yeah,
They work
yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
checkout.
Right.
Uh,
Now, the competitor to Trader Joe is that Aldi chain, and
yeah,
Aldi's actually has decent prices.
yeah,
So, and you can't, and customer service there is totally different than Trader Joe,
yeah.
but it's not designed for that purpose. Now, I've gone to Costco in New York.
I always considered Trader Joe to be bourgeois. Like, let's get something a
Yeah.
little bit better. I'll
They
pay a
got
little
good
bit
stuff.
more. I want,
No,
I
they
want
Trader
something a little
Joe.
bit better.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Trader Joe. I mean, look, you've got some great food stores in New York.
Nah,
With
not like Trader
you
Joe.
got Zabar's, you've got Fairway, you've got great, and all the boroughs have local stores that also are pretty good. I
Yeah,
went just recently to a specialty Caribbean grocery store in the Bronx, which was a little bit of a schlep, but the prices there and everything was actually cheaper than in Manhattan. Because why? Because they're paying
Of course,
cheaper
yeah.
rent.
yeah.
So I mean, so it actually made sense. But again, Mamdani's appeal. Look at what just happened today with the Democrats in California talking about walking back their environment. I mean, I don't live in California, but supposedly they feel okay. Let's deal with affordability of housing, which is a serious issue nationwide, and so they want to address it. And like so, the Democrats. I mean, I personally think the Democrats have to go through a left or left liberal, whatever you. They got to go through a shakeup like the Tea Party, frankly. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. So the thing is, of course, I go to Costco. Grace likes to go to Whole Foods, and you got a range here, and there's not a problem. There's no food shortage anywhere. But
And you got to
Costco
probably
is
drive there,
middle
right?
class. It goes from lower middle class to upper middle class. And it used to be very important for movie producing because you can go into Costco and get lots of video equipment, shoot the movie, and
Yeah.
bring it back. They take returns, a very good return policy. So, but it's good. There's certain things they have. This is the thing that shocked me about Trader Joe's. When I went to Trader Joe's in New York, and I go to get my supplies, what I get is nuts. Okay. Of course,
Okay.
Costco is the best price for nuts. That is $4 a pound for almonds or walnuts, believe it or not. And $3 $4 a pound, no, maybe $5 a pound for pecans. That's ridiculous. So, but in Trader Joe's is always $6 a pound for almonds. Okay. Everywhere else you go in New York. Oh, so I go to New York to Trader Joe's, it's $6 for almonds. Everything they had except for uh, local food, fruits and vegetables, was the same price in New York as it is in LA. And that's like 20-30% less
Yeah.
than any other store in Manhattan. Everywhere else in Manhattan, almonds are $14 a pound, no matter where you go. Trader Joe's $6 a pound. So, and I've asked them about that, and they said, well, they don't want to, they got distribution going. They don't want to bother with having separate prices. And
Mhm.
they don't raise the prices. That they raised the price on eggs when there was a shortage, and then they brought them back down. I got the best price.
Yeah,
Well, when
I'm
guys
sure.
go, here's a more social science question. When you go into a supermarket, do you already know what you're looking for, and you go and you get it, and then you go to you check out and go home, or you go to the next store, right?
Yeah.
Most often. Women go and they start going down one aisle and then down the other aisle and then down the other aisle, and they're just looking for some pretty box. Oh, look at that.
Oh, come on. Now you're being
Yeah. I've
you're talking
asked the
about
checker. I've
being
asked the checkers.
stereotypical, Ken.
You ask the checkers. It's usually the women who don't, when you're checking out, you're online, it's 5 people, and there's a woman there and she's got a cart full of stuff. And then at the end, she says, how much is that? And then she starts looking in her purse to see where
Oh.
the credit card is.
Yeah,
God,
but that's
the
why.
guys,
Yeah, but
You think
Kenny,
credit card.
that's what your wife does?
no, Kenny, that's why they did.
Gotta
Look,
get
they
into
did a
the
study.
doghouse?
They did a study years ago
Yeah.
about how people shop, and that's why they give you those big ass large carts.
Oh,
because they like you to fill those carts. There was actually consumer studies done that if you give somebody a big ass cart, they're going to come out with more stuff.
yeah,
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
But you're not, look, I know Alex is a good cook. I'm a damn good cook.
Yeah.
I go into supermarkets with very
Yeah.
precise targets for
Right.
what I want to get.
that's
And,
right.
and I would say most women I know are the same way. I mean, I don't think that they're all lottie-dotting around. I mean, I wouldn't buy that at all because I
And
don't,
they're looking for a new experience. Oh,
I
they're
don't know about.
from Italy, this special this and the special
well,
that.
look,
I
in
know
Italy,
it was a
yeah,
Gail likes to what she likes to go to what
Packaging,
Cinnabella up
packaging.
there and
You
get
heard
all
the,
that all the
you heard
Italian
the
stuff. Right?
scandal like with toothpaste and shampoo.
Oh,
They
yeah, but
if they sell it's the same thing, but if it's in a women's package with like pink and flowers and they charge 10% more on a lot of different things that are the same for men and women, like toothpaste or soap. They whatever. It's not
yeah.
that. This is not a big.
No, that's true. Yeah.
It's not a political thing. It's not that bad. I'm not talking about how
No, they know they can
certain
get away.
races like malt liquor and menthol cigarettes. I'm not talking like that. But it's sort of like there are things, Chinese in LA eat in Chinese restaurants. Italians eat in Chinese restaurants. Chinese don't eat in Italian restaurants. They eat in Chinese restaurants. So you got that going on. I mean, mostly.
I mean, mostly Chinese people just cook Chinese food.
Well, I mean, that's how I find a good Chinese restaurant are the Chinese people eating there. We got some good ones here. I think
some
think
really good ones in town.
the food is
China.
better in LA. The grease is better in New York, but the food's better in LA, I think. Except for the
Well,
pizza question.
I'll say the food is better. Well, better in Paris.
So
In
okay.
general, having been there,
Yeah. Paris is
that's
very.
the best food I've ever had. But,
Oh, really? Yeah, me too.
and different cuisines. Like I've had, obvious Vietnamese. I haven't
Look
had
at
Greek. The
and
Greek,
all that.
the Greek food in Paris was pretty good.
I like Middle
It's
Eastern.
also part of because in Europe again they don't have they don't let them put the crap into their meat. And
Oh
so
my God! If you want
we
to,
do.
you want to be shocked, I could give it to you. You read the difference between American bread and European
Oh
bread.
yeah,
It's unbelievable what they do to American bread.
the
Just
preservatives and yeah.
not just preservatives like acid. I forget folic acid
Yeah.
and glyco something that makes it. They
No,
just
yeah. If you want to get really good bread in Paris, man,
Yeah.
back
It only lasts a day, but then you go get it tomorrow too. So anyhow, getting
even though
back into
a
politics,
burger is.
you're talking about New York. Everybody,
Though they will in Paris they will look at you funny if you try and get a burger well done
I think in New
or a
York,
steak.
the right wing will vote for Zoran. They want him in there because he's going to be.
I don't know
He's going to start. He'll show up. They want to push him. They got something to talk about.
well, yeah,
Somebody in the
you're
middle.
right about that. They're already talking about him. The thing is, I think that's going to backfire on their face. He's a smart kid. Look, I know his father. I've known his father for 25 years.
I know. I know you do.
And this kid, I've never met him really. I've never met Zoran, but Mahmoud is quite a brilliant person, and his mother is a brilliant filmmaker. So the one
you
thing,
definitely see he's so media. You can see he's media savvy, and he knows. Well, that's what they're saying. Well, to explain him and not to give him too much credit, they're saying, oh, it's just he puts forward a good face. He knows how to make a good video. That's
yeah, but he's also somebody who he'd do well with Rogan.
Oh yeah,
He'd do well on Fox News. It'd be hilarious because what are they going to do? They're going to go after him like, okay, Mr. Mamdani, explain. Because I would take the Brent Stevens editorial that he just did on the Intifada. So what do you mean by globalize the Intifada, Mr. Mamdani? What do you mean by that? Because you know what the Intifada is to a Jew or to an Israeli? It's blah, blah, blah. You could just show what exactly it meant. And are you in favor of suicide bombing? Are you in favor of blowing people up, Mr. Mamdani? I mean, what do you mean by intifada? So that's one thing he's got to deal with. Then the other thing he's got to deal with is, okay, you sit there and talk about rents, this or that. What about the free market? What about the fact that, there's this dearth of housing supply and some people have, and I would cite, if I was arguing with him in a debate, I would cite all these conservative critiques and say, well, what about supply and demand? We started having an argument with Aaron a couple of days ago, and I told Aaron, look, you're not going to argue with me. I'm a New Yorker. I'm somebody who benefited from rent control.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear none of your bullshit about what you think about how people should live in New York, because they're not going to fly with me.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not going to fly with me. I
told them he should come down to the diner and argue with all of us about
Yeah, well,
and then we can relate more other people more than me relate all the different horror stories about fucked up landlords and the shit they do.
Well,
you're gonna say that's okay, the free market.
Well,
throw all of us on the street essentially.
Well, that's the whole thing. See, and then I said, what do you know about? I mean, I sort of laugh at somebody like that because when I was sitting there working in the relocation business, I would have to sit there and go to the real estate board all the time. I used to go to the real estate board of New York once a month. I used to sit there, and whenever they had discussions about co-op prices or condominiums was coming in as a part of the property mix in the 1970s. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but clearly with new luxury housing, they wanted to have condominiums built because they didn't have to worry with co-op boards. And people want to be able to rent their property and not have to deal with a co-op board. So condominiums became the favored part of luxury construction. But, he's going to sit there and argue with me. The vast majority of new construction in New York, we all know the battles that had to go on to have mixed usage construction. And that's not enough to deal with the kind of problems that people have in terms of housing. And so,
it's absurd when you have, people paying like half their income for rent. I mean, that's just not sustainable. You can't live.
Well, it's funny. Bernie said with Rogan, it's very amusing to watch. Because sometimes Bernie drives me nuts, but his whole alta caca mentality. But nevertheless, he was actually having a reasoned discussion with Rogan. The last half hour broke down because Rogan started to get into his bullshit about COVID-19, and then he got into conspiracy stuff, which I can't go with. So I sort of said, okay, later for that. But Rogan, before that, they were having a pretty reasonable discussion because Rogan clearly voted for him twice.
Yeah,
it was sort of and remember, there's a lot of Trump supporters who also were attracted to Bernie. I wouldn't say a huge majority. But, maybe who knows what percentage it is. Still an interesting percentage. And so, we're going to see these kind of arguments. Those are the arguments that have to come out over all this communistic crap of accusing Zoran of being a communist lunatic. I mean, I'd call Trump a fascist lunatic. I mean, here's this guy who basically disrespected the U.S. Constitution to try to perpetuate himself in power, and he has the balls to call somebody a communist lunatic? Give me a break.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's good. I don't think, I think you should express yourself more strongly, but apart from New York.
Really? Okay.
Apart from New York, let's graduate away from that famous cover of New Yorker magazine. You got New York and Jersey and flip LA. So we got a whole country. So who are the Democrats going to put up to be ahead of the party? I wrote down, I don't know, I don't follow the Democrats that much, but there is the guy who did a 25-hour speech. You know who I'm talking about?
Cory Booker. Yeah.
Cory Booker, right. There's AOC, Cory Booker, Gavin Newsom. I think it's been several presidents now that have come out without political background. So why not go with, Jesus Christ, I keep forgetting all these names. The guy who is, oh, there it is. Ah, got it. George Clooney.
but he's never run for office.
So what about Donald Trump? He never ran for office. What about the Terminator man? He never ran for office, became the governor of California.
But
And,
Clooney still
and
got
in
a
other
pretty
countries, you got which country down south has a poet who's now the prime minister? Was it Colombia or Brazil?
not Colombia.
Oh, look at
No,
Zelensky. Does Zelensky have any kind of background?
well, Zelensky was put up to run. He was they literally I forget the guy's name. There's one Ukrainian oligarch. He basically created a TV show, Servant of the People, where Zelensky plays a teacher who becomes accidentally the president, and then so basically it's like they did a whole propaganda series about what a great guy, how he should be president, and yeah, then they ran him for president. So it's not like it was organic. It was
That's what I'm. That's what
it
I'm
was
trying
just
to
all
say.
propaganda.
So why not? What it's already happened.
I mean, I know you could, but I don't think Clooney wants to run for public office.
He's too busy. He doesn't want.
He's doing. You got to remember again. One reason Trump ran is because again they didn't renew his TV. It looks like it was originally like a ploy by him to get his The Apprentice renewed, and when they didn't, he's like, okay, now I got to actually run. Probably, yeah. I'm pretty sure that if they had see, the NBC could have shaved us from President Trump. All they had to do was renew his contract, keep the show going, and he probably never would have, run in 2016.
Oh, you mean when we had a show called The Apprentice, that kind of a show?
You don't remember that, Ken?
I didn't watch that. I couldn't.
Yeah,
stand
but
it. I don't.
you must
I
have
don't
heard of
like
it.
Trump. He's a pain in the ass. He's an asshole.
Some of them were funny because
Yeah, they have a show like that.
it was all about his ego
They have a
anyway,
Shark
and the
Tank.
celebrities that he brought on.
But anyhow, so okay, so we're making jokes about it, but it's serious. AOC is not going to win, not outside of the blue states or the blue states,
Probably not. No.
and I don't think Cory Booker will. And or what about? I don't. I put it in there. I think just as a joke. Stacey Adams. How about her?
Well, on the other hand, Trump may wreck the country so much.
I think Trump's
he may destroy the Republican brand.
the Democrat.
And then you can run Kermit the Frog for for the Democratic Party and he'll win.
Well, if you
don't
want,
know.
have you seen the Secretary of State?
The
on
current
TV?
one, you mean?
Rubio.
Yeah.
He's got a good
he
TV
wants to,
presence. He's got a good.
But he wasn't even the last one standing in 2016. He didn't get close. He's not that good a candidate. So I don't see him even winning the Republican nomination now.
Oh,
It'll probably be Vance, if anybody.
oh, I'm saying let's say there's a scandal with Vance and Trump kicks off.
I mean, I think he's not a great candidate either, but I think DeSantis would beat Rubio
DeSantis.
primary,
Yeah. So
or Abbott from
but the Democrats don't seem to have anybody who's middle and not crazy.
Well, they all gotta run for the MAGA vote, so they're gonna pick somebody who's a nut.
No, but who do you think's going to run? Who do you think's going to take over the Democratic Party? You think it's going to be?
I don't know. I don't see anybody. I mean, Harris, of course, is dead politically.
Wait, who's the guy?
Like you said, again, I don't see Newsom they're going to try probably, but yeah.
Newsom, Newsom's running.
They need new people anyway.
He runs on his haircut. But who's the guy who's the head of the minority party in the House? I forget his name.
You mean Hakeem Jeffries?
Say it again.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah, I think that's it. He's had put himself in the public eye.
Yeah, but again, he's always saying these mealy mouth. He's always doing Trump light, essentially.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was 100% behind bombing Iran, and he's basically trying to be a right-wing Democrat. So I don't think that wins none of them want to. I don't know, except maybe AOC want to run to the real base of the Democrats because they're like, oh, scary left wing.
Well, the Democrats have done pretty well with getting a younger, well, a candidate with a Southern accent, you know, a liberal with a Southern accent, like Clinton or Johnson and Jimmy Carter and so forth. Southerners, you know, have a soft spot and they get covered, and, you know, maybe they're not as radical. They're not like stuck elitist liberals, you know, elitist lefties.
Oh, they keep losing with elitist liberals like Hillary and
Oh, yeah, she loses. That's right. She doesn't have a Southern accent. She's a woman and she's like dykey. And, you know, it's a good question of, yeah, though if people thought Michelle would go somewhere, forget about it. I don't understand this.
She didn't want her husband to run. So why would she run?
She didn't want her husband to run. Who?
Just like Mrs. Powell, she thought he would get assassinated as a first black president. So I don't think she wanted. I mean, I think they've said she didn't want him to.
So you think so at this point in time, there's nobody on the horizon that you think could.
I mean, you know, again, they're probably trying to recycle, you know, Buttigieg or somebody like that.
Jim, what about you? You could do it. You're under 80. It seems to be the limit these days. No. As long as you get in.
They would have fun with the Jim Dingman.
Like, Dingman name? Is that
you will get the crazy left winger treatment.
Who, Jim? Crazy left winger? No, come on. No. Not all the people he's interviewed. And
they're like, oh, he's part of this crazy group of Pacifica. They're a bunch of, you know, far left, you know, nuts, which is not, of course, true.
Well, okay, so you know this.
I mean, hell, if you ran, Kent, they probably would tar you. You know, oh, his wife served on the Pacifica board. He's, you know, he must be a Marxist.
You don't have to go that far. I'm a draft dodger and a Scientologist. I'm dead.
Plus, you were, yeah.
I'm a draft dodger, you know.
You were?
Yeah. Well, not really. They wouldn't let me in because of my proclivity to like men.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. I tried everything else and they wouldn't let me go. I told you know, my parents are crazy. I'm a minister, everything. They wouldn't know. You're going, son. You're going to go. You're going to learn to speak Vietnamese. You're going. I said, well, I don't know. You know, I don't want to make trouble for anyone. Get the hell out of here. They kicked me out. So, because I was not afraid of danger. I just didn't want to. I'd previously been in a position, you know, it's not nice when somebody says, you beat the shit out of that guy because I'm telling you to. Why? Because I'm telling you to. You do it or it's going to be your ass. And that's basically what the Army is, you know. I don't want to be burdened with that. You know, killing somebody for no reason. That's really bad. It's really bad. You know, that's what people come back with the PTSD because of what crimes they committed.
No, it's a moral injury.
It's not a more. It's a
because you know you get educated to think killing somebody is bad, but then they'll tell you you got to do it for the country.
Oh
and,
no!
They tell you you're not supposed to kill civilians, but
there was
then you get into Vietnam and they tell you to burn down that village, and
there was
it contradicts what you've been.
No, I don't. They don't. They teach you to fight because you knew somebody was your buddy who got killed.
Yeah.
And also there was a major problem in World War I where too many 34% of the soldiers, I'm making up a number, but a large percentage of soldiers would not fire the guns. Because I'm not going to kill people.
Well,
so they had to. They trained them to be.
There's guy, but you're thinking World War II. Yeah,
World War I.
A study by S.L.A. Marshall who claimed, only 1 in 12 people actually shot at the enemy. But again, that's been called into question by a lot more data and you people didn't shoot to kill anybody.
Yeah, but now with the young the younger generation growing up with the video games, it desensitizes them. You're just
That's
shooting people. It's not, I'm not killing anybody. I'm just bing, 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 just pushing a button.
Yeah.
So you did
No,
desensitize.
and if you're doing it with a
So,
drone,
so what was the name of the study?
then it distances you from what you're
You
doing.
don't think the Army tries to do that to make it?
Oh no, they do. We know. This guy, David Grossman, who's a retired military, wrote a whole book called On Killing that talks about how they get soldiers to, and what is.
So okay,
Well, there's a whole there's even a whole
I don't know if Jim left us.
part of sociology that
Jim didn't make any suggestions for who could take over the Democratic Party, because what the right wing is saying is like, oh, shut up, you have no solutions yourself. You were here. What did you do about anything? Nothing. You didn't handle anything. So now you gave me the problem. So now we're solving the problem. You opened up the borders, so we got to shovel the shit out. What did you do? Nothing.
Right.
You brought in people. You invited them in, 30,000 a week. Bring them in by airplane. Venezuela, Cuba, and Haiti.
We're going to get to pick your strawberries, America.
I tried finding the origination on that because I don't know where they come up with the decision about these 4 countries that would get favored for immigration: Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua. And are saying like it was an order from Biden, 2022.
Exactly.
It's a 2022 executive
stabilized
directive. So how did he come up with those countries? Why those countries?
They're countries you want to destabilize. They're
people suffering all over. You can't walk for 10 feet running into a problem. You just look and put your finger down. Somebody needs help.
We want people to leave those countries to undermine
there's political
revolution or Maduro or the Sandinistas in Nicaragua was the 4th one you were saying.
Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Well, Haiti, Haiti. We want to keep Haiti as essentially like a semi-colony where
no. That's not the agenda. There's no political gain in those countries from taking refugees here. There's a gain in the census. You take a thing, you say, well, we'll put them in blue states. It gives a higher census, more people in the House. That's the basic theory.
No, again,
eventually they can vote.
The Republicans gained from the Cuban vote. They will vote consistently.
You think? No. This was not legislation. It was an executive order by Joe Biden in 22 or 22, I think, or 23 maybe, but 22. And then he gave him this what they call
this
temporary permanent. You can't be kicked out. And
why
these 4 countries? Why? What happened to Italy or all the Yugoslavian countries? There's people starving all over the world. Africa, Asia, Malaysia, Fiji, the island that's being eaten by the ocean. What about the people who live there that, the water's taken over? There's tragedies all over the world. Philippines. What about the Philippines? They're locking people up like crazy. And El Salvador, he didn't take anybody from El Salvador.
We do get a lot of Filipinos here because, again, a lot of them historically they enlist in the U.S. military. They become.
That's right. So why didn't they take them in? Why didn't they import?
And again, there's been a whole history. Again, I have plenty of Filipino friends, and you go to any hospital in the U.S., you'll see plenty of Filipino nurses.
Yes, there are. That's right. They don't wind up on the dole that fast. They become nurses.
Well, they have a profession when they come in.
Yeah, they pick the profession up. I picked it up in the Philippines. But I'm just saying, I think eventually someone will find out what's behind it. But I don't know. I don't know. They're not taking people from Formosa. They're not taking people from anywhere else. Just those 4 countries. Why? Why those 4? What is the principle? What is the history? Is the tradition? What's behind that? Now, there's the Jews being denied during World War II.
Sure.
which I say you have to. They did accept a large amount of Jews, but they didn't accept all of them. And the country isn't all Jewish or pro-Jewish or sympathetic to Jewish. So there could be like, anti-Semitic people in the country who say, why are too many Jews? Cut it out.
Well, that was a big reason. Yeah, they didn't want to let in because the idea. I mean, people believed in like the protocols of the elders of Zion, and that there
Yeah,
was
they believe they,
and
well,
that I mean, people did. One of the reasons we never made a bit, at least during the war, a big deal about what was going on with the
look,
Holocaust
do you
because
think excuse me.
there was the claim that we're fighting the war for the Jews, and
Yeah,
we didn't
so
want to give any credence to that, so we just kept that
that's
quiet.
right. So
I
that's
mean,
a political,
even the New York Times, if there's a whole book on how the New York Times basically poo-pooed the whole idea again all the way through like 42 or 43 that this was happening. They kept it very quiet because
yeah,
even though they're a Jewish-owned newspaper, they were that afraid of anti-Semitism essentially,
right, right.
and
So,
they didn't, and a lot of them didn't really believe it could be
so
happening.
the thing of Zion. What would you call? I forgot it. The book about the elders of Zion, right?
Right, there's a conspiracy of Jews to take over the world, basically.
And you don't think it's true?
That they're, well, of course, it's not true. I mean,
Okay, wait a minute, wait a
was,
minute.
that
What
book
about
was
the?
written by the Tsar's secret police. That is just complete fake.
Wait a minute. So that's not true. What about the James? Excuse me, the Bible, the Christian Bible. You think that's true?
What the hell does that have to do with that?
Yeah,
Really.
It's just something that's not true. It's true. It's not true.
well,
People believe
religion.
all
Yeah,
kinds.
no, it was. Look, they've gone through huge. Frankly, one of the people who used to appear with us, his father, was a person in the late 30s who presented an English translation of the Protocols of the Elder Zion.
Yeah.
That doctor who lived out in Long Island.
Oh, okay.
I think you remember who he was, Alex. He hasn't been around for a while, but he used to. He was very proud of his father doing that. And the amount of Jews that came in before Pearl Harbor was, significant. But looking at the overall scope of what happened, not. I think it was close to about 150,000 Jews came in from 33 to Pearl Harbor, and
Well, I think 50,000 to Palestine, and I forget how many.
Palestine, because of the Great Arab Revolt, and because of British policy in the Middle East, because they were afraid that if they accelerated they were manipulating the amount of Jews coming into Palestine, because they had to worry about the strategic effect of that on the Arab world, because the Arab world was reacting to that in 1933-34. They didn't want to completely alienate the Arab world, so that's why they issued the McDonald paper in 1939, which talked about the control of that, and that led to the creation of the Stern Gang, basically the Jewish terrorist organizations that were mounting terrorist operations against the British because they were angry about that. But yeah, the amount of Jews who came in before Pearl Harbor was not significant compared to the overall necessity of it, and there's pretty good. There's no argument about those numbers. Now, the Protocols of the Old Zion, there's no argument about that emanated from the Tsar's secret police, but that is taken as a source of legitimate truth. Remember when Ahmadinejad, argued about the Protocols of the Elder Zion being written? I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't do well for Iranians. That makes them look like idiots. The whole question of what's going on, the big beautiful bill you raised earlier. I'd like to hear a little bit about that because we sort of have not been getting back to that, but.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
got Kay on. Well, let's hear what Kay has to say about that. What do you think about the big beautiful bill debate?
Oh God. Oh God. Well, it's so big. Well, there's a few little things.
You're a nurse, and we should add that you're a nurse.
Hey,
Yeah, well, I'm a retired PA, so I'm actually
please leave
higher ranked than a nurse. But
leave your video on, please.
Oh, okay.
You can see us. We can see you.
All right. Well, we all
charming appearance.
Except for Alexander, he's not gray.
Yeah.
All right.
He said we had a
I'm
post.
trying to undo it, but it won't let me. Okay, there you go.
There we go. Okay. So you're
Well,
retired.
it's going to cut. Well, I've read about it. It's going to cut 16 million people off of their health insurance.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to do this. They claim they're only getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, people who shouldn't be getting those programs anyway, but that's not what they're really doing. In every state where they have applied work restrictions or work requirements, basically it's so burdensome as far as administrative burden that they end up forcing people off. And these are people who there was a doctor on YouTube who said, I'm the one who has to write A on my patient's prescription bottles if they're supposed to take it in the morning, and P if they're supposed to take it in the evening. And they're expected to go online once a month and upload documents to prove that they still are eligible to receive Medicaid. And that's just outrageous, but and then, they're also attacking the food, the SNAP benefits. So why attack food and health in the poor unless you want to kill off a few people? The SNAP benefits, the food bank, the guy who runs the Food Banks of America has said that they do not have the resources to take up the slack for all the people who are getting SNAP benefits. So it's really serious. And now my representatives, like my Senator James Langford, said, well, if we didn't vote for these tax cuts, there would be an increase of $907 billion in taxes for people next year. And nobody wants that, right? But then when you look at the bill, what they're doing is increasing the national debt by $3.5 trillion. So where's all that other money coming from? They're adding tax cuts and 60% are going to benefit those are going to benefit the 20% who make the most. So and we're gonna just increase the national debt ridiculously, and needlessly. And the whole idea of this supply side economics and trickle down economics, we know since Reagan times it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the benefit of the people in America.
Doesn't even work for the economy.
Now, yeah. So
again, there's also, I'll put it up. They're also going to have a huge increase to the ICE budget. We're talking multiplying it. They're also here. I can play this clip that they're talking about. They're going to create like a whole ICE prison system for 100,000 people.
Oh yeah.
And you can easily, of course, use that to incarcerate, just dissidents, people. These guys, again, they're former military talking about this, and they're like, to them, this basically, bring on the brown shirts. This is you're creating a government force that can just round up enemies of the state and jail them forever. And
alligator Alcatraz.
That's
well, I'll tell you that the Seminole Indians, I'm in Seminole, Oklahoma, are protesting alligator.
It's on their land.
Because it's on Seminole land in Florida, which they were forced to leave and come to Oklahoma, half of them. So there's a Seminole, Florida, and there's a Seminole, Oklahoma. I'm in the one. But and they're given quotas that they have to meet, and they're not arresting enough people. So they're out, there's many stories now where they've actually picked up people who are citizens. And of course, he's trying to undo birthright citizenship. And the Supreme Court hasn't said, no, he can't do that. Just like the Supreme Court said, well, he's the president and he can do what he, gave him kind of carte blanche as executive. So, it's so clearly unconstitutional. And we have I think that what the Supreme Court has done is basically trash the idea of equal protection. So that if you're a woman in a red state, you don't have the same protection if you're a woman, as far as the right to control your own bodily integrity and decisions.
And Ken,
And
feel
now
free.
it's the same with if you're a birthright citizen. You can be a birthright citizen if you live in New York, but maybe you can't be if you live in Texas.
Ken, let me put this thing on. It's like 3 minutes, not that long, 3 minutes.
Sure, go ahead.
These guys talking about the ICE, because again, we're talking tens of billions of dollars they're going to put into the budget. They're also, at the same time, they're pointing out they're only going to have 800 immigration drugs for the entire country. So basically, it's going to be like a rubber stamp, deport these.
Okay, go ahead. Put the clip on.
Let me share it.
Be sure to turn the sound on.
Yeah. Let me just check audio. Let me just check. Sorry. Audio. Okay. Yeah. It should. Okay. Yeah. We're on computer audio. Again, they're all former military. These guys.
Whenever Trump says the America or the American people, when it comes to our interest, he's referring to big corporate interests. That's what he's referring to. So if you just flip those two terms in your mind, everything he says will make sense about what he's talking about. But it's a little sleight of hand he does when he's speaking to the public to try and manufacture consent for everything. Yeah, and so I think we should go through the big beautiful bill, because for me, this is very much like new regime, martial law, soft launch. Okay, and we can talk about the deputization of National Guardsmen to be like immigration lawyers and stuff. But Trump's big beautiful bill earmarks some $170 billion for immigration and border enforcement related funding provisions. This a federal secret police force and a for-profit detention center carceral system under the guise of immigration enforcement. This bill includes, we're going to go point by point so you can see what they're really doing here, $45 billion for building new immigration detention centers, including family detention facilities. This represents a 265% annual budget increase to ICE's current detention budget. It is a 62% larger budget than the entire federal prison system and could result in daily detention of at least 100,000 non-citizens. Almost $30 billion towards ICE's enforcement and deportation operations, increasing ICE's annual budget threefold. Alongside this increased spending in immigration enforcement, between 12 to 17 million people are at risk of losing their health care through Medicaid cuts. A new $10 billion fund to reimburse DHS, Department of Homeland Security, for costs related to safeguarding the borders of the United States to protect against the illegal entry of persons or contraband. This funding is nearly 50% of Custom and Border Patrol's fiscal year 2024 budget. However, unlike a normal budget, this is my favorite one, it's a slush fund. This funding would provide very few guardrails and little guidance to how DHS must use the funds. As a result, this would become, again, a slush fund for Customs and Border Patrol to largely use however it's determined. And this is my favorite part, it caps the number of immigration judges to 800, despite record backlogs in the immigration court system. So it's expanding detentions, it's expanding detention facilities, but capping judges that could process these things. So longer processing times just sitting in a labor camp.
So that's the future again, yeah. 100,000 immigrants in jail, basically, every year. And plenty of room for to put all of us in jail if they want to.
He also walked it back because he had a lot of complaints from Republican farmer, agriculturalists who need the workers. And
Well, they're actually talking about like essentially like a slave labor,
construction, yeah.
or they would the farmers would guarantee their workers, but basically you would the way it's set up is like, okay, they're like, okay, for every day you're in the country, we're going to fine you, X amount of money, and then we're going to charge you interest. So like, if you're going to have, like a $5,000 bill essentially
You
coming
have
back
to work
across the
off,
border
right?
that you have to
Yeah.
work off. So it's going to be basically slave
Oh, it's
labor.
human trafficking.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. Wow.
Because you were here illegally and you cost the country some, even though again we know undocumented immigrants basically pay into the system and get nothing for the most part.
But even, when he makes an edict, no, some people they kind of they're running with it. The right wingers.
Oh yeah.
They're kind of ignoring even what he says. Oh, let's not do this and let's do this other thing instead. And if they like it, they'll do it. And if they don't like it, they won't do it,
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been having fun trolling Fox News. So I've been reading literally hundreds of statements by Republican voters who support Trump. And they haven't really thought about the consequences of the big, beautiful bill in terms of their own states. I mean, that's obvious to me.
Crazy.
And then some of them, of course, will say, like, completely nativistic, xenophobic, racist things. And like, I finally got to the point where after reading like literally dozens of them, I said, your opinions, if this had been the prevalent view in 1940, you would have probably wanted accommodation with Adolf Hitler. And so all your faux patriotism with your flags, to me, represents essentially mollycoddling of American-style neo-Nazism and fascism. And you can take it all you want, and and it's, in some ways, I'm tempted to throw up a URL and invite them to come here because that would be hilarious as all hell to have a big battle with these guys. But I'd enjoy it because when we have like Kenny's sort of lightweight compared to these other guys. These guys are like they think that Trump, if Trump farts, his fart has to smell well. And remember, Trump himself said I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, nobody would do a damn thing to me. So, the whole big, beautiful bill stuff, I think, now the question is how the Democrats
That's what
are
he did to
weaponize it.
Tom Tillis. What he did to Tom Tillis.
Oh, yeah. But, the other thing is how they're going to weaponize it and will successfully, because also the midterms show that, Trump has a lot of approval ratings. It was very funny when they showed that that Fox did a poll, which basically said that the big, beautiful bill wasn't popular with the Republicans. All these Republicans started saying, well, they didn't poll me. They didn't ask me. And so that raises the question to me of, again, how does this translate into political power? It's one thing to say, hey, the midterms are coming, guys, watch out. But, the midterms can come and the Democrats can screw it up. And it gets back to what Kenny raised. Who's going to, quote, be the, quote, leader of the Democratic Party? And is it, and look at Musk. Musk wants to basically set up a third party. And he sure as hell has the money to do it. So, what's it going to be? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson will be the elements of that? So it's an interesting time dynamically, politics-wise in America. That's for sure.
Well, I saw something today. I don't know why today. And maybe something about, I don't know. It was about the Holocaust again. I don't know if it has to do with 4th of July, but maybe it does. But it was some testimony going back to the very early days of the Third Reich, and it started slow, but it caught on, and what it was basically spreading hatred, and there was like there were incidents where they showed an incident where 300 Jewish people just clubbed to death by the local citizens. Just pure hatred. And that's what he's working on, is just hatred of brown people.
Well, yeah, Well, the other thing about it
It's just in, working on people's hatred, as if that's,
well,
literally.
how do you see that where you live in Oklahoma, Kay?
What?
How do you see all this around
Uh,
you in Oklahoma? Where you live outside Tulsa or Oklahoma City?
I live in Seminole, which is about an hour and 15 minutes as the crow flies southeast of the city.
Southeast of Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
So that's in the western part of the state, right?
No, it's in the east, south,
East,
east. Yeah.
southeast, okay.
So,
So what do you sort of see, what sort of vibes do you get from different age groups and people about
well, our leaders, Stitt and Walters, our superintendent of education, was famous for buying $3 million worth of Trump Bibles in order to put one in every classroom. He's a dominionist. He wants to, and he went after. There was a teacher in Norman who gave people a link where they could go online and see what books had been banned, just the list of books that had been banned. And our legislature is ridiculous. They actually had passed a law against, doing that. And so she was actually in violation of it. And they fired her. He tried to go after her license. He didn't succeed. I think she moved out of state and is still a teacher somewhere. And he tried to get her arrested. He didn't succeed with that either. But there a lot of school boards, a lot of good people on school boards have resigned because the atmosphere is just horrible. So it's and they're trying to do incentives for teachers to stay here, but we have a lot of teacher training schools, which was done at a more wiser time, I guess, in our history. But they don't want to stay in Oklahoma because the atmosphere is just horrible for working. So they can't give them enough money to stay here, basically. And
Okay, hey, Kate, we were talking a little bit earlier. Who do you think could act as representative or leader of the Democratic Party or possibly run for president? Cory Booker, AOC, or anybody? Can you think of anybody?
Sorry, I get emails and texts all the time asking for money, and right now I just don't have it. I have a lot of health issues and I've had to pay extra money. I'm going to have cataract surgery, and Medicare doesn't cover it all. And we just had a little car accident. We have to get our car fixed and kinds of stuff.
Oh, okay, but who do
So
you?
it's hard for me. I mean, I read these emails, and they sound like good people. And I even have Al Franken. I thought what happened to him was totally unnecessary, and he was a great senator. And I know it was to try and get Doug Wood. I think it was Doug Wood elected in Alabama, and he served one term and then didn't get reelected, and we lost Al Franken for that. So I think that was an error. Because what did he do? He was making a joke. I mean, it was. Anyway, so I like Al Franken. He's not running. I love Bernie. I think Bernie's really amazing. He always zeroes in on exactly, the issues. He's got I just recently went to Bernie's rally here in Tulsa, and and he had all the facts at his disposal. And it was ironic, during the rally people's cell phones started going off with the news that Trump had bombed Iran. And so people started yelling out, "We bombed Iran, we bombed Iran." And then he got a note, from his assistant, and he read out, what Trump had his statement about it. And he was very nimble. He was able to switch to that topic and not, without a problem. And it's amazing, he's old, if not older than Biden, but he's certainly got all his marbles intact. But I understand that we can't really be looking to 80 people in their 80s. I'm in my 70s, so I can tell you we can't be looking to people for people in their 80s. We need young blood. I think the guy from Pennsylvania, what's his name, who wears shorts to the Senate? What is his name? I mean, you know who I'm speaking about. Fetterman, right. I think he's not so bad. He has attracted the young people. It's like, I don't care if I want to wear shorts, Bermuda shorts to the Senate, that's what I'll do. And they kind of like that kind of spirit, so I think he's maybe not
But sometimes
not formal enough to appeal to the older
I
guys.
think sometimes though he's voted like Joe Manchin, like voted for some really right bad stuff.
Hey, Mike, what about Mike? Let's ask Mike. You're there, Mike. What
do you want to
think? Who can move up, step forward, take over the Democrats, run for the presidency in 28?
Well, I think if we can get Franklin Roosevelt.
Oh, you got to get a good shovel, dig them up.
I don't know. I mean, there's people I like. There's people that I've liked in the past that I thought were moving up. Hakeem Jeffries, I thought was moving up. Cory Booker, I thought was moving up. And I'm not asking everybody to agree with all their policies, whatever. I'm just talking about viable candidates. But who the hell knows? I mean, the country is going down the drain. I don't know if we'll make it to the next election. Michael Moore once said something before, in about 2017, he had an ad where he showed a picture of Donald Trump and said, "You're looking at the last president of the United States." Now, of course, after Biden got elected, we said, "Oh, well, I guess Michael was off, but maybe he isn't." I don't know. But all I know is that last night I was trying to explain to people at the Canada Day celebration from all across Canada what the hell was wrong with Americans. And I said, well, they had it. The generation that went through the Second World War and had gone through the Depression is no longer in power, and nobody else knows how to deal with it anymore. Or Americans don't know how to deal with themselves. I don't know. You're probably talking to the wrong guy, because I don't have much faith in Americans anymore.
Okay.
I'm talking about, there are enough people. It may not be a majority that I have no faith in, but it's close enough to a majority to do the job.
Yeah. Okay. I noticed something here in this discussion. Nobody brought up Kamala Harris.
Well, I think she got a bad rap. I think she certainly tried her best. I think that the deck was stacked against her. I like Cory Booker. I thought he was very spunky to do that filibuster in the Senate. I like Buttigieg, but I think that it would not be good for the Democratic Party. What really got to people, I'd say, here in Oklahoma is this whole trans thing. It just kind of like becomes kind of the emblem of the Democratic Party. Trans women in women's sports and all that, and pre-pubertal hormones and even surgery and all that kind of stuff. And I'm even skeptical about some of that, but I'm in favor of, everyone needs health care, and whatever, when you're an adult, whatever kind of health care you think you need, you should be able to get. And I'm in favor of, everybody, who wants to serve in the Army should be able to serve in the Army. If you want to die for your country, who's going to say you shouldn't die for your country? But because they're saying he kicked the trans people out of the Army.
Yeah, but the Army isn't there for the benefit of the trans people. It's not a club, it's not a gym, it's not it's not an American
No.
place to lose weight and learn how to march. It's supposed to have a function. The function is, protecting us from aggression and some other things,
Well,
emergency.
there's been thousands of trans soldiers that are great soldiers.
Yeah.
Well, let me just throw in a point of information there,
Yeah,
Ken.
go ahead.
The Army is there to do its job, defend the country and perform all the military services, including risking their lives for the country. But it's only dependent on who's qualified to do the job.
Right.
To be quite honest, when you're in the field and somebody's supposed to be, and you're under fire and somebody's got to give you cover, people don't care less what their sexual proclivities are, what their ethnic background is, or anything like that. Can they do the job?
Right.
So when you start pushing people out of the military because of things that have nothing to do with their ability to do the job, then you are hurting the military.
Well,
Okay.
even Joni Ernst was in favor of that anyone should be able to enlist if they want to. I mean, then of course they do have to qualify. One of my jobs was I worked in psychiatry, and I had people asking for letters for the Army, because it would be like the junior has been diagnosed conduct disorder all his life, and all of a sudden his family says, well, let's send him into the Army and they'll make a man out of him. And I'm like, the Army has this, I had to learn some law about it. The Army has this presumption of soundness. And so once they admit you into the Army, you are presumed sound. So that anything that happens to you after that, they're responsible for. Like if you break under stress and you have a psychotic break under stress, then that is war related or battle related. It's not that you had this problem before you ever went in and it was not diagnosed properly. And so they, I had to just tell them, I cannot give you this letter. And they probably shopped around until they got their letter, but so it was, I did have some experience with, that whole presumption of soundness principle.
Wait, could I do a follow-up on that? Have you had any experience handling people with gender dysphoria?
Oh yeah, I had a long career. I did a lot of different things. I also worked for Planned Parenthood, where I actually did trans healthcare.
So would there be an added burden handling somebody in the military who was involved in some aspect of trans dysphoria in terms of requiring extra care or medicine or consideration?
Well, if they're all the way trans, they require hormones if they're going to stay all the way trans.
Oh, they'd have to continue getting.
Yeah, it's a continual thing. So it's a medical expense that the Army has to pay. But
and an added care.
And
Like,
there were questions about, say if there was a trans woman who couldn't get her hormones, and got captured by the enemy and started to transition back to whatever the original sex was while she was in captivity. Would that be an unsafe thing? She or he would be more vulnerable and would be subject to torture and maybe, break under torture more readily because there's physical stress and withdrawal from these hormones. So I had doubts about that myself as a medical person. Actually, listening to Joni Ernst convinced me, well, okay, if they want to try it, they should just try it, if they're able to do it,
It's good it may be good from the individual's aspect. Like I could go down to 6th Street in LA and live as a homeless person if I want to do research and find out about it. But the thing is, in the Army, let's say my brother wanted to be a pilot, but he wasn't qualified because of his vision. He had very thick glasses. So, and if somebody's got an amputated leg, they might not let him in the Army. So the Army has a right In fact, it was a very interesting case. I heard that the Army has a minimum standard of 85 on IQ, because if you recruit somebody below 85, you're going to have somebody watching over them. It's going to add to your duty, not relieve you of obligations. So you have to have a certain IQ, and you have to be fit, and you have to be able to do something. Not everybody in the Army goes to the front. You can work in an office. You could stay behind lines, or you could just fix mechanical things. But I'm saying the Army's task is to develop the best fighting team they can. They're not there for social benefit. It's not a community, oh, let's handle everybody who's got some problems, or handle, it's not a free clinic, and it shouldn't be.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you raise those issues, because I was listening to a kid a few days ago in that class talk about how he knew women in the Marine Corps who enlisted so they could have multiple babies, and that would allow them not to go and deploy. So they would have 2 or 3 kids, and then, so I'm sure there are examples of that. But the Army as a social experimentation vehicle, well, you get into the whole question of the integration of the Army in terms of races, which was indeed a laboratory for social change, particularly during the Second World War and afterwards, when Truman signed the desegregation orders in the late 40s. Now, the question of the intelligence of an enlistee, I was talking a long time ago to a friend of mine who now runs this, he's now a tenured professor at Ohio State. He was a colonel in the Army. And we were talking about the whole question of what they used to give. They used to give what they called Armed Forces qualifying tests, which were IQ tests, basically. And the question of Group 4s, Group 3s, Group 2, and Group 1s. Group 1s were the highest IQ percentile. Group 4s, the Army tended not to want to take because they rejected them because they were too difficult to train. And one of the things that they make a big deal about during the Vietnam War was Project 100,000 of LBJ, when he decided to bring in the Group 4s into the armed forces, and that created a lot of problems. Now, I had friends of mine who served in infantry units. They had people who were Group 4s. These guys they could shoot a weapon just as well as anybody else could. But these days, the armed forces indeed puts in requirements to make sure that they will get the modern day equivalent of Group 1s and Group 2s. And the other problem, of course, is the fall in physical fitness standards among the people of the United States in general. Most kids, a lot of kids, couldn't pass the minimum physical fitness test against the armed forces to start with. Now, Trump,
Too fat, too obese.
Yeah, exactly. But Trump with Hegseth, I would wonder if they have taken down. When I went, the last time I was ever in the Pentagon was, good God, it was many, many years ago. Probably 1992 or 93 was the last time I was in the Pentagon. Pentagon used to have a shopping center in the basement of the stop at BART. So you could go into the Pentagon. You couldn't get into the Pentagon, but you could go into the stores that were associated with the Pentagon. And so I remember the last time I was inside the Pentagon itself, they had a big picture about, what's her name, Walker, the only woman who won the Medal of Honor. She was a doctor in the Civil War. They took the Medal of Honor away from her in the early 20th century. Now, or someone like Jackie Robinson, who refused to sit in the back of the bus at Fort Hood in 1943 and was court-martialed. Now, with all this anti-DEI stuff, and of course, Hegseth cleverly renaming all the bases, giving them names of people who weren't associated with the Confederate Army, but everybody knows that's all a bunch of bullshit. To actually name a fort after Braxton Bragg has always amused the hell out of me. One of the worst Confederate generals, period. But that to me is something anti-American. It's to me, and what I mean by that, I mean it's that we have a diversity, a multiplicity of cultures in our country, which makes us unique among the countries of the world. And the tolerance for others, to me, is one of the most extraordinary things growing up in New York City, which to me is one of the great, beautiful things in New York City. So to have all these people who have legitimate social resentments, there's no doubt about it, someone making $80,000 a year, that's the average income of a Trump voter in 2015, 2016. They've got lots of issues with the way the economy is. They're like on the verge of tipping over into a situation where they could, a couple of paychecks away from having serious problems. But does that class resentment, that lower middle class resentment have to translate into nativism, neo-xenophobic attitudes, racist attitudes, etc.? It just seems to me detrimental to the national security of the United States of America. Frankly, to me, it's a national security issue.
It's a national security issue not to allow the police department, the fire department, or the Army, or the Navy, or the Air Force have specific requests.
No. I'm talking about. Well, no. The armed forces has the right to have certain standards. Hegseth, of course, he's like trying to take the place backwards.
Oh, no. Not talking about Trump. Just talking about.
I'm talking about Hegseth.
But yeah, not talking about people.
Well, the transgender.
Talking about you're running the Army.
All right. Well, if I'm running the Army, if a transgender person can actually perform their functions well, big deal. There are plenty of them who are patriotic. There are plenty of them who are patriotic. There's plenty of them who are patriotic, who want to serve. I mean, look, different strokes for different folks. There were gay people in the military. I mean, I know somebody who, I'm not going to name the person. He was a very senior officer in the military. And the first time I ever met the guy, I said, holy shit, they've got a gay professor at West Point who's a colonel in the Army. And I said, but nobody gave a shit. It was don't ask, don't tell wasn't even the issue. They just don't ask. And
not just that, Jim. These guys who getting, do like OSINT to figure out, okay, they're trying to figure out, were we really going to attack Iran? And one of the ways they could figure out, is there was a lot of pizzas ordered at this restaurant that's next to the Pentagon, but also
the
business at this notorious gay bar that's like the closest to the Pentagon basically nosedived the day before we had, we did the bombing. So, yes, obviously there are a bunch of people at the Pentagon who are gay, and
anyway, who cares? I mean, who cares? I mean, look, it's not, I don't have the attitudes I had in 1966 when I was totally homophobic. I mean, I was aggressively homophobic. I've learned, I don't have those kind of ignorant attitudes. And how many Republican, look at McCain. McCain had one of his daughters or his granddaughters was gay. So that sort of had an influence on McCain. McCain.
And Cheney's
daughter. Oh no, and also Goldwater.
Cheney.
Yeah, Goldwater. I met Goldwater's sister.
Well, come on, you're talking about personal things. That's not the issue. The issue is who sets the policy. If you're the captain and you can require certain behavior of your staff. You could say, make the bed.
Well, I used to tease. I used to
do 100 push-ups.
I used to tease friends of mine on active duty when this whole gay issue started in the 80s. Because I used to say, hey, what about the Spartan band? Those guys all fucked together and they died together. They actually fought pretty well. So their response was, well, the average teenage American male is not going to take that stuff. He's not going to put up with that stuff. And they're right. The average, guy enlisted in the armed forces is, definitely at that point in time in the 1980s was probably in general, I would have to say, typical of, the attitudes towards gay people at the time, which was pretty negative. But people change and people have relatives who are gay. I mean, and then the AIDS crisis, I think, really had an impact because I know people who had to deal with the fact that their kids were gay and they died of AIDS and they died of a disease. I mean, that's really what blew my mind because I had friends of mine who were gay who died of AIDS. And it's that was like a whole, and then I had straight friends of mine who died of AIDS because they were needle sharing or they also, slept with a woman who slept with a guy who was, all this kind of stuff. So the whole thing changed. I think Americans' attitudes towards gay people is much more tolerant these days than it was 50 years ago. That's for sure.
That's fine. but who should set the standards for the requirements for membership in the U.S. Army or the police force or the fire department?
Well,
Should
I
it be
think the point is,
social
it shouldn't-
director or should it be the military and the police
I
director?
think the point is it shouldn't be politicized. It should be
No. It should be functional.
based on standards, physical and mental, and whatever standards. It should not be the president has said we're not going to have DEI anymore. We're not going to have gay people anymore. Those are political.
Or it shouldn't be then, likewise, it shouldn't be, we have to have a diverse community proportionate to the makeup of the country. So we can have 60% white and 20%.
They shouldn't be looking at
13%.
They should be looking at applicants and making decisions based on who's applying.
On their
Except
requirement, merit-based.
yeah, but Hegseth, look, Hegseth is an idiot.
Okay,
I mean, no. I know people. I hear this from people on active duty. I hear this from people on active duty who regard him as an idiot.
you gotta answer this one.
My father, who's nearly 100 years old, who's in the Army, he regards Hegseth as an idiot. I mean, like Hegseth.
An idiot. So
Well, look, Hegseth.
Who are you not critical of that's associated with the Trump administration? Who? Name one person.
Who?
Yeah, anybody.
Who? I don't know. Let me. That'll sort of like.
I'll give you a week. Come back and say,
Well,
no, not a maniac.
Who do I not think is a complete reprobate? I don't know. To me, it's like Batman comic books come alive. That's how I look on the cabinet of Donald Trump.
That's the secret. That's how most decisions are made. It's like DC Comics.
Well, it is. Well, it is. It's like I don't. Trump could be a like Bane figure in a way. I mean,
you got to suck up to the guy. I mean, look at I thought Tulsi Gabbard might be decent, but she essentially said, oh well, after saying, well, the intelligence shows Iran isn't going to get a bomb.
How about people in the
bomb?
How about
she did a 360 and said, "Oh, Trump is right and I was wrong."
And any Supreme Court member appointed by a Republican president that you think is okay?
I mean, Roberts occasionally is. He's not a total nut job.
Who appointed him?
Bush.
I think Bush did. Bush too. I think appointed him.
And even
Bush one, I forget.
Alito has sometimes he's
Alito's brilliant, but
he's principled.
Well, you can expect from Alito what you get. Clarence Thomas, of course, forget about it. All of us sat through that hearing, that crazy hearing that weekend. I mean, that was like, I sat there with 4 African American friends of mine in my apartment in the West Village, and we just sat there and got high and watched the whole goddamn thing for 4 days. It was great entertainment, particularly when they got into the porn movies that he was giving to Anita Hill. But I met Anita Hill later in life at a Human Rights Watch film festival. And here's this emotional. I was emotional. I said, Professor Hill, I have to thank you for your courage to fight against what occurred there. Because remember, to me, that's where Biden got a dirty, bloody nose in my mind. Because he basically went along with all those jerks that day. And he likes to,
Not only again, they had Thomas dead to rights because they had two other women.
Oh yeah,
willing to testify that he did the same thing to them, and they could have sunk him.
What, Michael? What, Michael?
No, well, and also Kay. But the well, first of all, I think I have to tell you something. I knew people, I met people who knew Alito back in the day, and they said he was never that bright. He's a hack. That's what I was told about him. So don't give me this stuff about, he stands principle. Come on, give me a break. There are people what's going on. Ken asked a question, is there anybody you can agree with on the Supreme Court? Well, on certain issues, Amy Barrett has come through but rational on some issues.
Yeah, so she's gone back to the evil side though.
No. But the fact is, you can say that some of them, including Roberts, are okay on some issues, but in general, This is an extremely conservative, it's one of the most conservative.
Yeah, but look at the implications. Look at, well, first of all, look at this decision that just occurred with the 14th Amendment. Michael, I think we all could agree, maybe there'll be one exception, but we all could agree that the 14th Amendment is the birthright citizenship issue. It was a basic fundamental principle of law that has, further evolved since the Civil War when it was passed. And now we're having a decision where they basically decided to give Trump a win because they took out the ability of the district courts to have universal decisions, which Trump will go through. That's like opening the door to Trump because he'll make a big deal about that and hit everybody and attempt to prevent them from doing it. Like I heard today, there was somebody who decided in a district court to negate deportation of Haitian immigrants. Well, they're going to sit there and say, oh, wait, what just happened in this case that just occurred with the Supreme Court deciding that the district courts don't have the power? And what it also underlies is, and here, of course, I always love to argue with conservatives because, any of these conservatives, particularly the MAGA types, not many of them have actually read or thought carefully about the debates that went into the founding of the Constitution. And what did the founders learn from? They learned from the deterioration of the Roman Republic. They learned from how the Roman Republic essentially turned into, under Augustus, and particularly after the outcome of the Civil War, an empire. So they wanted to make sure, and also based on the lessons from the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution of 1688, they wanted to make sure that there was a balance of power between the commons, the parliament, and the king. Hence, they translated that into the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. What we're seeing right now is essentially, with the Unitarian theory, that Article 2 trumps everything. We're essentially seeing the erosion of the Constitution the way they intended it. It's been going on since World War II. Obviously, you can blame the Democrats, too, about this. But Trump, of course, is taking it to extremes.
The erosion of the Constitution has been going on long before that.
Yeah. But
a very conservative court. You could say Plessy versus Ferguson, etc.
Well, Plessy, Plessy, my mother's lawyer in Oakland was a distant relative of Plessy. So once he once sent me over to Bolt Hall Law School in the library when I was in California to do research for him on Plessy. So I sat and read. Plessy was amazing. That was an amazing case. But, people are talking about Trump is sending us back to the antebellum Supreme Court of Chief Justice Taney. That's really crazy. But anyway, Jim,
the fact of the matter is, when you get a conservative, even reactionary Supreme Court, or a Supreme Court whose ideology colors their interpretation of the Constitution, you're going to get that's what we're getting now. Yeah. That's what we're getting. We've had it in the past, but what we have now is a perfect storm. And that's where the country's in mortal danger, because you've got all the branches of the government in this reactionary state of mind, and it's kind of anti-constitutional state of mind.
Well, but
that's why we're in a shitstorm.
Well, but see, the funny thing about their arguments, which I'm listening. If you watch Bose, what's his name? Who was the guy? Bove. So Bove is in there in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he's arguing that, of course, Article 2 is the Constitution of the United States, and so they're going right back to the whole question that Article 2 says the president can get whatever the hell he wants. And we had last summer, United States versus Trump, which basically gave Trump, basically gave him the outs on all those cases, particularly the Jan 6 case in Washington. But anyway, Jim, Mr. McFadden's here on the phone. Let's hear what Jim has to say.
Wow, I was enjoying all of that. So, but I guess I was putting my comments in this chat, but I think Trump is doing a pretty good job accelerating the decline of empire, just as did Nero and Caligula. And so we can look forward to maybe having a multipolar world sooner than we would without Trump, And as far as, is there anybody in the Trump, cabinet or any appointees that aren't anything but his cronies and sycophants? I'd have to say the few I had held out to, like Gabbard, proved that they are just as good at brown nosing as anybody else, and so they're going to do what he says. And so we have somebody who's fickle and out to show himself to be in charge when he really doesn't know what's going on. We got a person who doesn't read, who doesn't know history, who doesn't know very much, but he does know how to con people, and he's probably good at recognizing a con, if somebody else is trying to pull one on him. But I don't think he has a whole lot else going for him. So I think we're going to just keep seeing these huge mistakes, which people are going to try to explain away with blunders. And I think part of the reason is that even though it's cabinet, you might think that there'd still be some people around him, that might. But if you start looking at something like foreign affairs, you just find there's a lot of delusional people in the ruling class. So it's not quite clear to me that he's going to get any advice out of the people that he might actually happen across. So I think we're just going to keep seeing more bad decisions and then backtracking, when the bad decisions go wrong, attacking, the sneak attack the U.S. and Israel did on Iran. I think that was now shown to be a bad decision. So we tried to get out of it, by calling a timeout, which, might last another month before we try another sneak attack, to decapitate him, but we won't call it a sneak attack because we don't, the U.S. doesn't do that. The U.S. doesn't engage in assassinations, even though clearly we did, and clearly we have in the past. So it's kind of an interesting time right now. I'll stop there.
Well, I'm just going to come in and say, when I said, about the the whole Iran thing, I haven't seen the final intelligence estimates or anything like that. I do know one thing: no nuclear program can be totally obliterated because they're going to go back and start from scratch. So whatever it is, it's a temporary fix. It could be months, it could be years, it could be decades, whatever it is. However, we don't know. I don't know. You guys obviously are all tied into the highest level of the international intelligence network, because I don't know what the extent of the damage is. And I don't think anybody's getting full access to the Iranian nuclear facilities or their ballistic missile facilities to find that out. There are assessments, and we're basically at this point making educated guesses. But the fact of the matter is, we can all form our opinion based on your own ideology. But it's this type of thing where people are just this rush to judgment, if I can paraphrase Mark Lane. That's the name of the game now. Just rush to judgment. 24/7 news cycle. We got to know now. We got to have the answer now. If we don't have the answer now, I'm going to bed, or I'm going to watch the ball game. It's, I just don't have confidence on the right or the left. I don't have confidence in Americans. I don't know if I have confidence in people anymore. I think we're losing it. There's a lot of pressures in the world. There's climate change, and everybody's sticking their head in the sands about it. Not everybody, obviously. There's all types of things going on. People are under pressure, and sometimes it's easier to say, you know what, if we just pull down the blinds and nothing is happening. But the fact is, people are giving in to, and again, I see, racism becoming more, it's always been there, certainly in this country, but it's coming back with a vengeance. And again, not just on the right, on the left too, to the extremes. And until we start getting away from the extremes and getting into some sort of moderation. I'm not saying the extremes don't have a place, but when that becomes the whole, the whole kit and caboodle, it's all about the extremes.
When have the extremes on the left ever been in charge? I can't remember a time that the extremes on the left were ever in charge.
Well, not in this country, but in other countries.
Okay.
And by the way, the idea of in other words, the old saying, when you go too far to the left, you wind up holding hands with the far right. I mean, this has happened in the past also. We just basically people have to just, I guess, just calm down, be rational, state their points, be open, not be so. The thing about Americans are they're so fucking sure of themselves.
Okay, come on. Don't be so prejudiced.
I've got the answer. It's something like that.
And very racist talking like that about Americans.
You know something, Ken?
What?
You're right. But unfortunately, I see a lot of Americans saying that. No, not all Americans, obviously. But no, it's just I don't know. I just see what I see as a trend here, and that is society, in the international society and the national society is falling apart. We're breaking apart. We're becoming tribal.
For a country that professes to believe in democracy and that democracy is the best form of government, we sure have been good about installing autocracies and dictatorships around the world. The only kind of the only thing we like is somebody who will do the bidding of the empire, and if they don't, then we'll get rid of them. And that's been going on, for the last since the end of World War II. I mean, if we didn't like the government, we couldn't trust the people in those countries to actually govern themselves. We had to go in, and I got a big dose of this because I've reading about Guatemala, and I'm reading really details about the people who lived through that, thing, because we couldn't trust the Guatemalans who were wanted to educate themselves and wanted to actually do things. We had to go in there and do a coup.
Okay, wait, James, I'm gonna interrupt for a second.
We're doing it in this country.
You got to be careful about. Everybody's got to be careful when saying we. They're saying we, the American people, everybody who's on the continental divide, and everybody. But I want to change this a second because we have a good opportunity here. We have somebody with lots of military experience who's in real world situations who can give us a viewpoint on what just happened with Iraq. So Thomas Morgan, just a question. Do you think that it's appropriate for the U.S. to intervene in Iran's access of nuclear weapons? And what do you think about that trick he did of saying, I'll give you 2 weeks, and then he goes on the second day and bombs them? Was it just a show of force to show, I'll do it, and I'll do it next time too? Or was it effective, or does it matter? What's your viewpoint on it?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be asked that question. A number of years ago, when we still had the Iron Curtain up, I was in a unit that had the nuclear warheads for the artillery, and some of those questions you raised probably were appropriate, but we had control of them. The Germans were going to fire them. The British were going to fire them, and probably the French were going to fire them if necessary. But we had custody of them until they left the tube. And we damn near did it over the Berlin crisis in 81. We damn near did it. But the Russians broke back down. We got away with it.
Do you think we should be paying attention to Iran's efforts to get a nuclear weapon or not?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I mean, we were concerned about what the Russians were going to do in Germany. We knew they had nukes, and sure we should be concerned. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the action was appropriate? Bombing Iran, trying to.
Well, no, there it gets to be a little.
That's a tough question.
Not quite so positive, Yeah, I think I'd favor bombing Iran, but I could probably be talked out of it.
You could be talked out of it one way or the other. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Consequences will be revealed in the next month.
You see what hasn't been revealed, as far as I know, is what does NATO think about that? You know, what does SACEUR think about that? You know, our big general that we have, and of course, probably smart to keep his mouth shut, or Trump would probably fire his ass. But you know, I don't know what they think about it. People like that.
Okay, good point. Anybody else?
We you know, we have nukes. We could nuke damn near anybody we want, but of course we shouldn't.
Yeah, but I mean, the enigma there is, if Iran had a nuclear weapon, anywhere they use it in the region, on Israel, whoever, Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a consequence to all of the Middle East.
Oh yes, yeah, oh yes.
So and it backflow on them.
We gave them a very good reason to get one, because again,
Yeah.
well, obviously, if they had one and we knew they had one, I don't think we would be bombing them, because for obvious
Well, okay, all right. So the Israeli press in the past 2 weeks has been making the argument that this was a optimal time to launch this air campaign against Iran. They were arguing that when you look at the IAEA reports, which talked about how they were on the verge, I think they're in one of the reports, they talk about in the next 6 months they could theoretically produce 12 to 13 nuclear weapons. Now, the problem with all this has been going on now and being argued about for quite a long time. Well over, I'd say, I remember again listening to them argue about this back in 2006, 2007, and it's just gone on and on and on. Now, they argued that the reason why the Israelis felt that they're going to act and not wait is because after October 7th, all bets are off. They're not going to have a similar situation happen again. They're not going to be caught by strategic surprise. They're going to go on the offensive. And look what they've done. They have essentially reduced Hamas to this terrible situation, which I want to talk about in a moment. They've essentially restricted Hezbollah from operating for a whole bunch of reasons. They overthrew Assad, or they didn't overthrow him, but they probably were very happy that it happened. And then you have a situation where Iran was always depending on being able to launch a simultaneous attack against Israel. They wanted to have Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Hamas, all of them cooperate together in a synchronized operation, which did not happen. So that always from the start of October 7th, there were arguments that were saying, well, wait a minute, the Hamas did not let us know that they were going to do this. Now, again, that's a debatable issue. We don't know really what the truth is. So all that's removed as a result of the past 2 years. And the Israelis felt that they had an opportunity to just basically nip in the bud this situation, and that's where they brought Trump into the process of cooperating with them. And there's no doubt in my mind that if they get intelligence that there's some, quote, setting up of a operation, they're probably looking for the visible material, we will go in and help them attack it again. Trump already announced that. Now, whether that's going to be the optimal outcome, I personally think that the Iranian reaction will be nationalistic, and they're just going to say, and their reaction was, this proves that we need to have a nuclear deterrent after what just happened. So they're probably going to go bonkers and try to develop a nuclear weapon. Now, what happens with the main countries that are supporting them? China, Russia, North Korea, wild card North Korea. What's going to happen with them? Because they actually have nuclear weapons, and will they cooperate with the Iranians? But then the other thing is the attention then swings to Gaza. And Gaza, of course, the situation is completely fucked up. 80% of the country is a free fire zone. You've got this issue of what's going to happen with the population there. Most Israelis were in favor of the attack on Iran. I think 90% of them were. And what is Trump doing? He's interfering in the domestic politics of Israel by saying, hey, you guys should let Netanyahu off the hook. And remember, he was about ready to get indicted. There were going to be court trials before October 7th. So we're left in a situation where the United States is going to get tainted forever with essentially an ethnic cleansing. Because what's going to happen to all those people down there? There's 2 million people, 2 million plus people. You know, where are they going to go? They're being starved. I mean, the whole thing is beyond, you know, reprehensible. And so that's one aspect of this crazy stuff going on. Then you have, in our country, the big, beautiful bill. Again, I'm sort of curious what people think about all this. You know, like, I know Michael has a cynicism about the American public. I can't share that. I don't share that. I think Americans can be persuaded. It's going to hit them in their pocketbooks. The impact of this. What are you going to do? People who still have to go to the emergency room? And the whole thing is going to cause, and each state has literally hundreds of thousands of people. In some states, a lot more. In New York, it's like, you know, I think close to 600,000 or 700,000. Literally, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are going to be affected by this negatively. And so does that translate into political power to make sure that there is a counterattack in the Congress in the elections and midterms? You know, I still have I think it will, but at the same time, you know, that takes, you know, you got this anger that has to be transformed and organized and focused in on doing that. And then that's a question, you know, because that gets back to when we were arguing about the Zoran Mamdani issue. Because Zoran, you know, he's going to be vilified. He's going to be demonized. You know, here's this commie lunatic. I mean, you look at some of the stuff that's going on with Fox, it's hilarious. He's a Marxist Islamicist. You know, like, I know he's not an Islamicist. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, to say that his father isn't an Islamicist. His father's one of the most secular individuals you could possibly imagine. So, you know, but that then waters down the message coming out of the BBB, which is saying, hey, working class and less fortunate Americans, you're screwed. You know, so what are you going to do? And I think it's going to
I have to say one thing. Part of you're right that a lot of Americans who supported this kind of thing will find out they're the ones being hurt by it, but it may be too late by then. That's the problem. Also, I wanted to say one thing about Iran. What a lot of the concerns people had about Iran having a nuclear weapon or nuclear weapon capability is because of their close association with these kind of proxy groups. Basically terrorist organizations, and which includes Hamas and Hezbollah, but several others. And that is what a lot of people that I've spoken to have a problem with. It's not that, if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, they're going to use it right away. Well, no, because they'll get wiped off the face of the earth. They may destroy other countries, but they're going to obviously get destroyed. But if they use proxy groups and give them a suitcase bomb or some sort of tactical nuke or something like that, or just nuclear materials, that's what they're also concerned about.
Yeah, but see, the problem, you know what the problem with that argument is? That they can trace the origins of any kind of nuclear blast.
But what happens when you trace it? Do you then just blow Iran off the face of the earth?
Well, you know, it's funny. The Washington Post had a very powerful little piece today about what a nuclear war looks like, and you know, and the main you know, and look, we all know that hydrogen bombs unloosed on the United States and any other society will destroy that society. Period. And you know, so and what is Iran's desire? You know, that's where the whole question of diplomacy and having tempering down of antagonisms actually in the long run is much better in terms of all sorts of outcomes. I mean, I'm not saying it's possible right now, but and then another issue that came up straight up was when you implement the sanctions. Actually, when Trump implemented and increased the sanctions in when he pulled out of JCPOA in 2018. They then assumed that this would have a deleterious domestic effect on Iran and would encourage riots, discrediting of the regime, etc. So the whole issue that they're not out for regime change is a bunch of bullshit. I mean, really, it's just total bullshit. And you know,
Jim, don't forget that most of the terrorism that's been going on has been going on by the Israelis in Gaza or the Israelis in Lebanon. They've been
Right.
bombing, indiscriminately bombing civilians this whole time, and or blowing up pagers to kill people. I mean, these are terrorist actions, and they're by a country that already has nukes. So
Right.
we
Right.
shouldn't discount that.
But
Well,
but the
yeah,
fact
they're not.
is they haven't used their nukes. Number one.
No.
Number two, that you can then say that
They came very close to using nukes a couple of times, and they've threatened to use nukes. In fact, that's the main use of nukes nowadays, is the threat to use nukes.
And
It's
the
not
threat to
actually
use
using them. It's threatening people to get them to back
Well,
down.
that's always been the case. That's always
always
been
that's
the
with
case.
everybody.
Yeah, no.
Everybody
Look,
does that.
look. Why do you think we maintain thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons? And why do they maintain? Russia maintains what, 5,000? I think there's a really good little TikTok video showing.
And the concern is that the U.S. will lose the threat of being able to make people back away.
Right.
If they also have nukes. So that's the real threat to U.S. power,
and
is
there's
that if somebody else has, they can't use that threat against them and get their way. So the U.S. is going to lose that ability, to dominate.
Remember,
Kay wants to say
I don't
yeah,
think
Kay,
the
go on.
answer
Let
is to
Kay
have
jump
more
in.
nukes.
Michael, let Kay jump in. Go on, Kay.
I just wanted to say, it's the whatever happened to the concept of nuclear deterrence as
Yeah.
where the world is at. Why should Israel be the only country in the Middle East that has nukes? But on the other hand, the more people that get nukes, the more likely we are that someone's going to use them someday. So, it's kind of a, you ask what are things like in Oklahoma? Well, we have the far right Armageddon freaks. They just think, oh, well, this is all signs of the second coming, and bring it on, and it's like dangerous time.
Right.
And I prefer, let me go back to Bernie. I prefer what he says. People are hurting. People are out of work, or they're working 2 or 3 jobs. Prices are going up. This is why the populism is succeeding. And it's a time when they're seeing that Trump is not it's not on their side, really,
Well,
So what do we do to take advantage of this moment? I think maybe that's what happened in New York with your socialist mayor. I think, I've done a lot of door to door for the Democrats, and I don't go around saying I'm a socialist because I want to get Democrats elected. But on the other hand, maybe it's time to come out and just, now we have James McFadden here. I'm sure he can say something about this, but maybe it's time to actually try and turn the ship in a different direction.
well,
You're right, Kay, because I have to find it, but there's this great graph that these people did of, comparing the 2021, mayor primary, in New York City with the one this, and you can see literally I think it's between 18 to 25, literally 60,000 more people voted than in 2021. So he got a huge number of really young people. You see, and also again 25 to 35. That again, just we're not involved in politics. He really, you can just see it. He even got more old people actually. If you look again, if you do that direct comparison, more older people voted. So again, the idea that and this is of course despite 98-degree weather, old people went out despite the risk to their health and voted. So but again, I got to find that.
But also really we have to, Alex. You have to remember. And now we're just talking tactically, not what any one of us believes. You have to remember that the Democratic vote was split. You did have Cuomo, who is obviously not too popular because of his reputation, but there were people at least some people that supported him. He did get some votes. And you had Eric Adams, who is basically, I think, destroyed himself in my view. But the fact is, he has supporters, especially on the law and order issues. And therefore, you had the vote split. When you get to the actual election, and these people are still running, Eric Adams is still running, and Cuomo is probably going to run again, you can also get this split. I also think that in the case of the nominee now for the Democrats, again, there needs to be some moderation. He has an opportunity, and I think he should take it, which is to say, no, I am not, and I think Hakeem Jeffries actually addressed this. No, I am not against the existence of the state of Israel. No, I'm not an anti-Zionist or whatever, but I am against the policies of Netanyahu. I think he's a war criminal, whatever. In other words, he's got to have some sort of moderating factor there if he wants to win the election. Otherwise, we're going to have Mayor Sliwa. And the fact of the matter is,
he already has been. You can see again, he's already done some.
Well, he may be, but nobody I've spoken to has heard it. I mean, in other words, he's got to get it.
No, that's because they're getting drowned out by all the hysteria. But it'll get to, I think.
Yeah, but Alex, he's got to. In other words, we live in a society where the loudest voices are the only ones people hear. The idea is that he has got to say, no, I am not this total radical anti-Zionist. No, I am not this, I'm not going to have a Marxist system, of government or something like that.
Let's be clear. Being anti-Zionist is not radical. It's human.
No, it's radical. And some people think it's anti-Semitic. And I could make a case where it is racist. To be anti-Zionist, unless you don't believe any racial, national, religious group has any right to have a country of their own, which means you're against the Palestinian state also. So the fact of the matter is, yes, he does need to address that. He does need to, and I'm talking tactically anyway. In other words, how do you win the election? And he needs to say, because let's face it, doesn't matter what his point of view is on the Middle East. He's mayor of New York. But the fact is, he's going to have to address these issues, address them forcefully, and show some moderation. In other words, say to the people, he is not radical he is not extreme, but he is moderate to a degree. He just has disagreements with these things, and he's against this and that. And he can't make that case because the other side, the Republicans,
the problem with that argument, Michael, is that, look, he's already appeared with Mahmoud Khalil, he was appeared twice, I think, with Mahmoud Khalil when he was released from prison. And the base of his support, let's say the DSA lefties, they're definitely have a very, you got all these different political tendencies. DSA, the way they operate in New York City, it's sort of like the SDS. They have all these different factions of the left in the DSA, and from all over the place. And they are welcome in a big tent. I mean, they have their own little factions and everything. I've had to watch them, in Pacifica because, they at one point actually announced that they wanted to take over Pacifica.
I remember that.
Yeah. So we had to deal with that. But there's sort of now the question you raised that I think about the globalizing intifada issue is where he has to figure out some way to message that it doesn't alienate his base. Because remember, he's going to Muslim communities. New York has large numbers of immigrants from all over the South Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East, and he's appealed to them politically. And they are not happy with sort of a blind Max Schnell defense of Israel. And then at the same time, you've got the generational divide. Younger people statistically throughout the United States are less willing to back Israel uncritically as opposed to people our age. And then you have another element in this, the MAGA element, which is quite interesting. The MAGA element, some of them are attacking the whole notion that why should we automatically support Israel? Look at not Marjorie Taylor Greene, but there is polling data that shows that there's divisions within the MAGA coalition on that very issue. But anyway, Jim, what do you want to say?
No, let me throw something in there. We're not. There's something we're admitting. Wait. Let me interrupt a second. New York City is using ranked voting. If your candidate you voted for got eliminated by being last on the list, your next candidate gets your whole vote. That's the way the ranked voting works. So Zahan will win. It doesn't matter if somebody tries to split the vote and take it away. The Republican guy doesn't have a chance. So split everything unless the Republican gets 50% of the vote.
The fact of the matter is that
I'm just saying ranked voting is a significant change.
I know about ranked voting, yeah, but
okay.
Sliwa, remember, Curtis Sliwa has made inroads, rightly, wrongly, has made decided inroads into the young minority communities in New York.
Yeah,
I know people involved with these things. They love him. They love Curtis. He has not been portrayed as a radical righty or as a far right wing. He's managed to avoid that so far. And the fact of the matter is, when push comes to shove, people vote more out of fear than anything else. And if they fear someone is going to take a radical approach, then they're going to either not vote or certainly not vote for him or vote for the other guy that seems less extreme, though he's on the opposite side.
Well, negative campaigning, which we're going to see in a big way in New York, always diminishes turnout. So that sort of reinforces, because if I was the Republicans, I would run a negative campaign completely. And then Curtis, the Jewish vote is not as important. It's important. It's not the great powerhouse it used to be in New York City when it was like, 23% of the vote. I think it's about 11 to 12% of the vote these days. So
where did you get that? Wait, Jim, where did you get that figure? 12% of the vote.
Look it up. There's only about 960,000 Jewish voters in New York City now. They're about 11 to 12% of the vote in the metropolitan, the 5 boroughs. It's not the same way it was in 1968 or 1972 when it was a lot larger than that. I mean, people have left the city. But anyway, what? They will get turned out. See, that's where the turnout will happen. And if I was the Republicans, I would be financing the shit out of Curtis Sliwa, and copy what Mamdani did with a big turnout the vote effort. But Mamdani is skilled at it. I mean, he got 50,000 volunteers already working for him. So it's going to be a tough race. But Jim wants to talk. Go on, Jim.
I was just going to say, push back a little bit on this idea that, being anti-Zionist is being anti-racist. First, I want to say that the Zionists, the Israeli Zionists, are the most radical racist group right now in the Middle East, in all the Middle East. And if you look, you can go back, you can go to people like Gideon Levy, and he'll say it. And I just put a link to this. The Zionists in Israel, they believe that international law doesn't apply to them because they're the chosen people, and they also believe that Jews, even when they're bombing other people and killing women and children, that they're the victims. In fact, they're the only victims in these wars. They're the universal victim, and that's part of the indoctrination that's going on there. And last, he says basically they don't believe that Palestinians are human, so it's okay to do this, And you hear this not only from the very top, from Netanyahu, but it's really become part of the culture there now. The majority, and so here's a place where you have a majority of people now who believe this. It wasn't always that way, and it's just become a really a sickness, a cultural sickness. and not so different than has happened in countries in the past. And
Well, I have to say one
there was a couple of good memes that are going around. One of them is that, what is the difference between saying you have food and shooting people, or saying you have showers and gassing people, or what is the difference between bombing women and children or gassing women and children? These are the memes going around among young people nowadays. Young people are getting it, that this kind of murderous attitude and Jewish supremacist attitude that's infected the Zionists, is really a death. It's a death cult now, and it's so bad that you can just see them, using the Samson option, to keep their way. So,
well, I have to say something, Jim. A lot of what you said, even though I don't think you intended it that way, comes across as racist. And I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, you're talking about their interpretation, or shall we say, their new interpretation of Zionism. The people like Ben Gvir, their idea of Zionism.
Alex, that's ridiculous to say it's their new interpretation of Zionism. I mean, come on, man.
I'm quoting Gideon Levy,
Jim, excuse me. Oh, wait a second. I think I was talking.
Yeah, well, right? I
made a point of not interrupting when other people were talking.
All right. Well, I interrupted you. Okay, go on. All right, go on.
So the idea is that the form of Zionism that I was raised with, that I learned about, that was taught to me, is not the form of Zionism that Jim was just describing.
All right, what Zionism was taught to you, Michael?
The form of Zion, I'll get to that in a second. All right. The idea is that unless you see that the interpretation or the forms of Zionism, that there are different forms of Zionism, and that some forms of Zionism could be good and some forms could not be good, or positive or negative, however you want to describe it.
Like the good Nazis and the bad Nazis?
Excuse me, Jim. That's the same thing as saying, Jesus Christ, no wonder that Trump got elected. What I'm trying to say is that saying that is the same thing as saying fundamentalist Islam are all Muslim. Obviously, that's not the case. And obviously, not all Zionists agree with this, what I would call Ben Gvir style of Zionism. That's not the Zionism. I don't even think that's what the Zionism that the majority of Israelis endorse. All right, and this whole thing about saying the Israelis all do this, and then chastise the Israelis for saying the Palestinians are all like this. Some Israelis for saying that. It's the same thing. Racism is racism. Period. It doesn't matter whether it's against Israelis or Palestinians, Jews or Muslims, black, white, whatever. Racism is racism. And until you see that, it's not like one person's form of racism is better than another one.
All right,
so the slave's racism against the white master is the same as the white master's racism against the slave?
No.
But that's what it sounds like you're saying.
No, I am not saying that at all. I'm just saying that racism.
All right, Michael.
When you start classifying people and start saying they're all like this,
well, that's true. That's true, Michael. That's true. But to generalize and say that this is something new. What we're seeing right now with Ben Gvir and Smotrich is sort of a new development in the history of political Zionism. Okay, it's true that these are more extreme versions of what always were the battles inside political Zionism from its inception. I would argue that Vladimir Jabotinsky, who actually at some point in his career, we're talking about the sort of grandfather of conservative Zionism, or the Zionism that people oppose nowadays, he actually talked about the question of how you should reach out to the non-Jewish population. And remember, that's where the whole concept of the Iron Wall comes in. That was Jabotinsky. But Jabotinsky's a complicated guy. Eventually, in the 1920s, he decides to receive aid from Mussolini because Mussolini is cooperating against the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the more extreme Zionists inside Israel by 1932-33 are getting aid and training from Mussolini's Secret Service. Now, and that's an objective fact. Now, the issue of what they felt should happen was at odds with the, labor Zionists, the question of, do you expulse everybody in this maximal sense? You see these maps of Eretz Israel, going into Jordan, going into Syria, going into Lebanon. That's the kind of Israel they wanted, an Israel based on the expansion maps of the various kings of the kingdoms of Judea, ancient Judea. That's what they felt should be reestablished in terms of our power. And and the internal population there be damned. If they cooperate, great, but if not, expulse them. And so that contradiction always is there. And then you get into the issue, and that happened before before 1939, certainly before 1947, 48, 49, with the first Arab-Israeli War, or the Nakba. And then you had the expulsion of everybody during the first Arab-Israeli War. So that set the stage for the conflict ever since. And the issue of settler colonialism is not, again, I know guys who've actually settled on the West Bank. And, they're people I like personally, but their justification, of course, is this was ordained to us in the Bible. This is our land. We're coming back to our land. And, and the hell with the Palestinians who might have been living there for generations, who, for all I know, their distant relatives are actually people who were there at the time of the diaspora in the 1st or 2nd century AD, the destruction of the temple. They could be Jews that were converted to Islam over the past centuries, but they don't care about that. So that is where, to me, the contradictions lie. And unfortunately, the question now of expulsing, look at what's going on. Huckabee, the ambassador of the United States in Jerusalem, well, maybe, they can take these people in other, Arab societies. So there's probably a whole discussion going on about that. Then Trump making his Riviera comment. And then you have the practical situation right now of these people ever since early March, when Israel decided to break the ceasefire and essentially besiege the population there. Well, okay, that is something that, may not play here. There may be people in the MAGA elements. There's a certain amount of American Jews are going to back Israel uncritically, but that doesn't play well with the rest of the population of the United States. That's where you see the divisions in polling showing that people aren't automatically assuming that Israel is right, and it's not right to starve 2 million people to death. I think that's beyond reproach, and that's where
in this country, though, that it's still the uncritical support for Israel has gone down, but it still represents the last poll I saw, a majority. Not a great big majority, but a majority.
But
a substantial number of Americans.
Well, there are, but then you look at how it breaks down politically. A lot of Republicans, the one thing I remember, I read that MAGA poll a couple of weeks ago, which talked about how, contrary to what we think, they are not isolationists. They actually have a sort of different view about what foreign policy should be when it comes to Israel. All sorts of reasons. Kay brought up the question of the Book of Revelations earlier. Some of them actually figure, the hell with all this stuff. We're gonna have to, think about the world. We're gonna have to think about apocalypse. A certain percentage of them think like that. Not all of them. A certain percentage of them think like that. And then, of course, the support for Israel in this situation right now seems to be rather solid in the Republican Party along the lines of how it's construed. But again, look at the world reaction. The world reaction to this is negative, and so Israel doesn't give a shit. They're going to defend themselves along the lines of what they think is right. I understand that, but we then have to go along with this. I don't agree with that at all.
Well, no, but wait a second. We don't have to do. In other words, Nobody has to do anything, but we will do things. See, this is the point I was making about the extremes. Okay. If either side says it's all got to be our way or not at all, if both sides are saying that, everybody loses. And that's exactly where we're headed, not just on that issue, but on most issues.
All right. Well, you're right about that. There has to be a way out of this. There has to be new creative ways that we possibly can't even think about to de-escalate conflict. And, you know, I don't particularly like to have to go on these Fox things and basically like troll them and sort of lose it a little bit with these guys. I'd rather have a decent conversation because I'm sure there are things we can agree on.
But real quick thing I want to throw in here, just when I hear somebody say something that's not true, you know, about whether the majority of Americans support Israel, and the answer is no, they don't anymore. And I put the link into the Gallup poll, which shows that it's down to 46.
I was
No.
No. You have to know what the poll is asking. In other words, they uncritically support Israel. The last poll that I saw said that the majority of Americans, not a huge majority like it used to be, but the majority of Americans still support Israel and Israel's right to defend.
Let's see the link. I put a link in the chat.
Dig it up.
Wait. It did not say that they uncritically support what Israel's doing in Gaza or anything like that.
Michael, that's let's bring King in. Michael, that's where the problem is, that, you know, every day now, again, admittedly, we're seeing, you know, kids getting killed, women getting killed. We're not seeing Hamas militants getting killed, and so I know that there is, you know, the issue of propaganda and all that, but nevertheless, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at these big pictures of devastation and say, well, is this really good? Is this real? I mean, where are we headed with all this? But go on, Kay. Sorry, go on, Kay.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make 2 points. One is, you know, one way to avoid the extremes is to go back to the facts, and you always need to do that. So we don't get all the news from Israel. We don't. You know, my best friend in New York, and maybe what I'm about to say is sort of anecdotal, but she belongs to a very progressive synagogue. And they support, you know, Israelis for peace, which is a bigger percentage of the Israeli population than we ever got anti-nuke demonstrations in America. But, you know, and these people, and there's some theories that, you know, these, I guess, are ultra-left conspiracy theories, that October 7th was a false flag, which was designed to do for Israel what 9/11 did for us, unite people around, you know, a military goal. And you know, there's the only evidence that raises questions in my mind is that the Israeli military did withdraw their forces 24 hours before October 7th from the border, where they burst out, attacked Israel. So did they know what was going on? Was it kind of like they just let it happen and they could have stopped it, or did they decide to use that episode to do what they've done? There's people, there are Jews who are Zionists who live in New York who think this, okay? And, you know, I think we don't have all the information about what's actually the whole fabric of society there. The other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, I did a lot of phone calling during 2024 for Kamala. We talked about Kamala. And I was calling the Rust Belt states. I wouldn't bother calling Oklahoma, but I was calling in the Rust Belt states. And I encountered a number of people for whom Gaza was a defining issue. And these are not necessarily Arab people. I know there's a lot of immigrants, like Ilhan Omar came from there, but these were not necessarily immigrants. These were American young people. It was like, I cannot overlook this. And Kamala, when she had the opportunity to distinguish herself from Biden, you know, she was on this, was it 60 Minutes? And they said, well, is there anything that you would do differently? And she said, no. You know, she was trying to be loyal to Biden, but she obviously had not thought it through. And that's not good in a leader, right? That you haven't thought through all the things that could come up. So, I mean, there were people for whom that moment was a deciding moment. And there's a number of people out there. Just, I mean, I personally feel like what what we're witnessing in Gaza is stomach turning. I mean, it's really, you know, it really is ethnic cleansing. There is no getting around it. And I mean, they've even shot 640 people trying to get food and water since March. And when you contrast that situation with what did we do with the Berlin airlift after World War II? You know, after Stalin declared the blockade of the part of Berlin that was supposedly controlled by the West, within days, they were sending huge planes in there 2 or 3 times a day. And to the point where I think they sent something like 240 missions over a 5-month period. And that was what was necessary to supply 1,700 calories a day for 2.8 million people. Okay, well, how much is necessary to supply 1,700 calories a day to provide 2.1 million Palestinians? We're not paying attention. We're like, oh, well, this started in March and here it is, you know, mid-July or in July, and there's basically just a trickle of aid going through. It's just so obviously, the contrast is just so obviously racist. It's phenomenal to me. I just think this is a potential issue for 2026. If we don't pay attention to it, someone else will.
I'm just going to chime in because I have to leave. I have to pick up my prescriptions in about 16 minutes. I just wanted to say that as far as what's coming out of the information coming out of Gaza, and I've been trying to parse this because I don't know what, I'm getting to a point where we don't know what is true and what is propaganda. Who's doing the shooting and who isn't? I mean, I believe that there's no doubt that the Israelis have a heavy-handed issue, so they're at least doing some of the shooting. I don't know if Hamas is doing some of the shooting. I don't know if these clans are. I don't even know for sure what's going on there. We all have our ideas and we all have what we've heard and everything like that. But it's very difficult to get accurate information. I know that people in Gaza are afraid to say anything that would be considered against Hamas or not against Israel. But now we have Netanyahu also putting pressure on the Israeli press, which has never well, I don't know if it's never happened before, but it doesn't happen that often there. Israel had a much more open society, but there's pressure. So I don't know. It's getting very difficult to figure out the facts and to figure out all this, what exactly is going on, and to get hard evidence out of there. And maybe we won't know until months after this is over. We certainly won't know what will happen in Iran till months after it's over, till several months after it ended. But the fact is that one thing I do know is that if you've got these extreme, you've got Hamas and the Netanyahu government, and Netanyahu is just simply an opportunist, but he's certainly caving into these far right fanatics. You've got this fanaticism running the show. Fanaticism running the show is not only destructive to human society, it's self-destructive to themselves. And as long as we take these extreme positions and try and don't try to sit down and say, okay, all right, let me see what the other side is saying, or is this a fact, or parse through it somehow. But as long as we take these extreme positions, then there is no answer. There'll be no peace, and we've had it. So that's
Michael, nobody here has ever taken extreme positions, okay, as far as I'm concerned.
Whoa. Extreme.
No, let me finish my point. And so your arguments about, and it's a known fact that, we have the United Nations Relief Web monitoring in detail all the time the problems of the food issue into the Gaza Strip. And the comparison with the Berlin airlift is very interesting because, remember, Leland Abbey, who you and I both know, was a pilot flying aid into Berlin at that time when he was in the Air Force. They actually flew 250,000 sorties into Berlin. And we're airlifting about about 3,500 tons a day. Now, you contrast that to what's going into Gaza, which is far, far less, because they're trying to feed a population in Berlin, which was, I don't know if it was how many people were in Berlin, at least...
2.8 million, and
okay, so 2.8 million.
population of Gaza is 2.1, so it's
all right, so that shows you right there, and that, of course, nearly provoked World War III, that incident. So,
Right.
and then the United States had that half-assed thing where they set up the wharf, and then that whole thing was a big screw-up because Israel will not allow the food to come in, and we know after, March 13th, I think, is when they suspended the food deliveries. And now what they decided to substitute was that Gaza Health Foundation, which is not necessarily doing the job effectively. So, you know,
that's an American organization. But however,
American, Israeli,
I really have to run. I'm just saying, right. The point I'm saying is that as long as you have the Netanyahu government, which is catering to the fanatical far right in Israel, and you have Hamas or Hezbollah or any similar organizations, certainly the Houthis also, and Iran, as long as you have this fanaticism on either side, it's not going to end. Nobody's going to eat, get food or drink or anything, as long as it's all being run by fanatics. So that's just my little exit line. So then you can go state your opinions. Okay. All right. See you guys later.
All right. Well.
Yeah, I got to go too, actually.
All right. On that note, Kenny, thank you very much.
Okay, you guys.
Thank you again, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kay, for coming. Take it easy, guys.
Yeah.
Back to watching. I'm going to go back and watch Andor, which is quite amusing.
Andor.
Walt Disney making a revolutionary TV show. Too much.
Yeah. Okay.
Take it easy, guys.
Anything for a buck. Okay. Good night, everybody. That's the end of this Going Viral session on the 2nd of July, 2025. I hope you watch it. I hope you're having fun with this, and don't give up the fight. See you around.